chapter is this one? 96. 86, okay. Hare Krishna. We are reading Sri Prabhupada Lilamrita, chapter 26. Srila Prabhupada smiled. Reading Sri Prabhupada Lilamrita, chapter 26. It was a pastime of Lord Jagannatha's, he said. The same thing had happened when Lord Chaitanya had attended Radha Yatra in Jagannatha Puri. Then also the cart had gotten stuck and no one had been able to move it. The king of Orissa had brought forward the most powerful wrestlers to push the cart and pull on the ropes, but it would not go. Even the elephants could not move it. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had then put his head against the cart and pushed, and only then did the cart begin to move. Now Ratha Yatra had come to the best, and with its pastime of Lord Jagannath. Prabhupada noticed some devotees were missing. Where are Yamuna and Janaki? He asked. The devotees told him that some hippies had handed out candy spiked with LSD, and that a few of the devotees had unwittingly accepted it, and were just now recovering. Subala related how, after the festival, they had traveled out on the freeway in their flower-bedecked, canopy-covered truck carrying 30 devotees and the deities of Jagannath, Subhadra, and Balarama. They had driven up through the mountains in what must have been one of the most unusual vehicles ever seen. After all the visitors departed, the deities remained in the house with Prabhupada and his servants. Prabhupada felt satisfied that his disciples had successfully held Ratha Yatra festival. Although untrained, they were sincere. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Bhaktivinoda Thakura would have been pleased to see the first American Ratha Yatra. The whole world was in anxiety. Prabhupada explained to the devotees gathered in his room that evening. Only in the spiritual world was there freedom from anxiety. Becoming free from all anxiety and returning to the spiritual world was the purpose of Krishna consciousness. And festivals like Ratha Yatra made people Krishna conscious. Prabhupada had many ideas for festivals. If he had the money and the manpower, he said, he could have a festival every day. There was no limit to Krishna consciousness. This Radha Yatra festival was another sign of the good reception for Krishna consciousness in the West. He wrote Brahmananda in New York. The house is situated in an exceptionally nice spot, and the house itself is aristocratic. So there is nothing to complain about the house and place. The only difficulty is that I cannot go to the temple on account of the zigzagging course of the road and crossing the mountains. Anyway, the devotees are coming here, and the Ratha Yatra festival was just performed with great pomp. More than 500 people followed the procession to the beach, and there were about 24 cars. They distributed thousands of chapatis, and at last Sri Jagannatha, Subhadra, and Baladeva kindly came here in our house and will stay here for 1 week and then return. Srila Prabhupada still talked about going to India. He had virtually made up his mind to go. The question was now when and whether by the western route via Japan or the eastern route via New York. The gray skies and unseasonably cool temperatures of Stinson Beach were a disappointment. And we coasted it down. The windows, the windows. The gray skies and unseasonably cool temperatures of Stinson Beach were a disappointment. His health was still poor. He even spoke of dying. But it's very noisy.
You want all the clothes to be closed?
It didn't matter whether he died in America or in Vrindavana, he said. If a Vaishnava dies in Vrindavana, the land where Krishna appeared, he is assured of joining Krishna in the spiritual world. Yet when Lord Chaitanya had traveled outside Vrindavana, his devotee Advaita had assured him, wherever you are is Vrindavana. To be always absorbed in thinking of Krishna was also Vrindavana. So if he were to pass away while preaching Krishna consciousness anywhere in the world, certainly he would still attain to the eternal Vrindavana in the spiritual sky. Nevertheless, Prabhupada wanted to go to Vrindavana. It was the best place to die or to recuperate. Besides, he had a plan for bringing his disciples to Vrindavana for training. He expressed this plan in a letter to Sumati Morarji, the owner of the Scindia Steamship Company. I'm thinking of going back to India as soon as I get sufficient strength. I'm now considerably old. I will be 72 years next September, but the work which I have begun in the Western world is not yet finished, and I require to train some of the American boys to preach this cult all over the Western world. So if I training. So your cooperation in this connection is greatly needed. You have already allowed my men from India free passage. Similarly, if you allow free passage for some of my American disciples, they can come to India and taking training from me at Vrindavan. The idea is that in this old age, I do not know when death will overcome me, and I wish to die in the last days of my life at Vrindavan. Prabhupada told Kirtananda, Hayagriva, and others that he would take them with him and show them the sacred places of Krishna pastimes. With the New York Temple's building fund, he would start his American house in Vrindavana. I may come to Montreal, perform the opening ceremony of installation of Radha Krishna Vigraha. Then I may go back to India for 6 months, and there is a program for construction of an American house for training preachers at Vrindavan. Vrindavan is the only solitary transcendental abode within this universe where Krishna consciousness automatically reveals. Therefore, I have a great hope to train some of my disciples for preaching work, even in my absence. I am now old man and attacked with serious disease. I may be overcome by death at any moment. Therefore, I wish to leave some trained preachers so that they can do the work of Krishna consciousness in the Western world. This is my ambition. I hope you all pray to Krishna so that I may be able to execute my duty properly. When Govindadasi wrote Prabhupada that she was anxious to serve him again, as she had in New Jersey, he replied that he would be going to India to try to construct an American house where you'll be invited to come and live for all the days. Both your husband and yourself, you will find a very peaceful atmosphere in Vrindavan to worship Krishna. Waiting for sufficient strength to travel, Prabhupada continuing his daily routine at Stinson Beach. 1 or 2 at a time, devotees would visit him from San Francisco. His morning walks on the beach, his sitting to take in the sunshine whenever it peeked through the clouds, and his evenings of kirtana and reading in the living room remained undisturbed and peaceful. Apendra. He would sit in his chair on the beach side of the house. He'd like to see us go in the water and play. At first, I felt a bit strange going in the water and knowing that Swamiji was watching me. But I went in and began washing my body. When I looked back at Swamiji, he was motioning from his chair, throwing his arm up like he was splashing in the water. He kept doing it until finally understood. But he wanted me to splash and play in the water. As I began to splash and jump around in the water, he nodded his head and smiled broadly. Mukunda, I went on a walk on the beach with Swamiji, and when he sat down, I sat down opposite him. Then he asked me, what is your definition of Krishna? I said, Krishna is God. He is a supreme being. Our duty is to worship and serve him. Swamiji seemed fairly satisfied, and then he said, You must chant 64 rounds per day in your beads. I was shocked at this and could not answer. I did not know if there was any need to answer. I just kept looking at Swamiji and he looked at me. After some time, he said, or at least you can chant 52 rounds a day. Still silence. I consider it to be very difficult to chant even 16 rounds. I was wondering how I could possibly chant 32 rounds. After some time, Swamiji said, at the very least, you must chant 16 rounds every day. I said, yes, Swamiji. I knew that I could at least try to handle that much. Prabhupada told Kritananda that he wanted to play the piano. Jagannatha deities who sat atop the piano for a week were now back in San Francisco at the temple. But when Kritananda and Upendra moved the piano away from the wall, they heard the thud of a falling object. What is that? Prabhupada asked. Kritananda reached behind the piano and produced a framed canvas wrapped in madras. He uncovered it and revealed a painting of Lord Nrsimha. Why is this being hidden behind the piano? Prabhupada asked. Janaki happened to be visiting at the time and she confessed. While she had been arranging the house for Prabhupada's arrival, someone had sent the painting out to the house. She had found it and hid it. It was ghastly, she explained. Lord Nrsimha was tearing open Hiranyakashipu's abdomen and there was blood everywhere. Patiently, Prabhupada explained that although materialistic people feel sorry for Hiranyakashipu, devotees become ecstatic when they see Nrsimha tearing him apart. Hiranyakashipu, he said, had terrorized the whole universe and had usurped the throne of Indra, the king of heaven. Hiranyakashipu had even tortured his own 5-year-old son, Prabhupada, a pure devotee of Lord Krishna. So there was nothing wrong in Lord Simba's pastime. In fact, Hiranyakashipu, having been killed by the Lord, had been liberated. After directing the devotees to hang the picture on the wall, Srila Prabhupada sat down and played the piano. The devotees had seen Prabhupada beautifully play the Indian harmonium, his left hand pumping the bellows, his right hand fingering the keyboard, but never piano. They were not aware he knew how, but he expertly played the melodies of Indian bhajanas. After about 5 minutes, he stopped. Some evenings, Prabhupada would speak or arrange debates, although Kirtananda was constantly cautioning. When Prabhupada wanted to speak, it was impossible for any of his disciples to stop him. Sometimes he would ask Kirtananda to debate with one of the visiting devotees. One devotee would argue for the impersonalist or atheist position, and the other would argue for the Krishna conscious position. Prabhupada would judge, but no sooner would the argument begin than Prabhupada would interrupt, take the position of the devotee, and defeat the atheistic or impersonalistic argument. The devotees loved it. Prabhupada was unable to confine himself either to the role of a silent judge or to that of a recuperating patient. Why do we concentrate on the impersonalists? Kirtananda asked. Why do we attack them so much? Why don't we concentrate our attack on the atheists? You say that because you are an impersonalist, Prabhupada answered angrily. On another occasion, Prabhupada explained that non-devotees who mislead the innocent public are demons and should be exposed. Kirtananda objected. If we call them demons, they'll never come around. But they are demons, Prabhupada replied. But we can't call them demons, Swamiji. Yes, there are demons. Unless you understand this point, you will not make any achievement in Krishna consciousness. Can demons become devotees? Kirtananda asked. Oh yes, Prabhupada answered. If they chant Hare Krishna and render service, even demons become devotees. Most of the devotees had to remain in San Francisco, hoping for a chance to visit Swamiji. From the few who knew firsthand, they heard about Swamiji's plans to leave for India, perhaps never to return. It was painful to hear. He's going almost to death, but then returning by Krishna's grace and rejoining them in San Francisco, yet being unable to stay with them as before. And now his plans of going to India, maybe forever, these activities intensified their concern and love for him. Devotees worried, speculating on whether they could carry on without Swamiji. One devotee suggested that perhaps one of Swamiji's godbrothers should come to America and fill in for Swamiji, and if the worst happened, take over the leadership of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. When the suggestion reached Prabhupada, he considered it without immediately replies, Mukunda. I was sitting alone with Swamiji in his room, and he was very grave and silent. His eyes were closed. Then suddenly tears began flowing from his eyes, and he said in a choked voice, my spiritual master was no ordinary spiritual master. Then he paused for some time, and wiping the tears from his cheeks, he said in an even more choked voice, he saved me. At that point, I began to understand the meaning of spiritual master and dropped all consideration of ever replacing Swamiji. After 2 days, Prabhupada said he would not call any of his brothers to come and take care of his disciples. He said, if this person speaks just one word different from what I'm speaking, there will be great confusion among you. Actually, he said, the idea was an insult to the spiritual master. Prabhupada said that he would initiate the new followers in San Francisco and asked that they come one at a time and stay overnight. Without performing any fire ceremony, he simply talked with each new person, asking him to follow the 4 rules and chant 16 rounds a day. When the follower promised, Prabhupada initiated him, sitting on the bed while the disciples sat before him on the floor. Prabhupada would chant quietly on the disciples' beads and then give him or her a spiritual name. One day, one of the new candidates from initiation came in very nervously and bowed down before Prabhupada. The boy did not get up. You can get up now, Prabhupada said. So you want to be initiated? The boy said yes and began chanting, not knowing what else to say. I'll chant on your beads, Prabhupada said. After chanting for 10 minutes, he returned them saying, your name is Aniruddha. What does that mean? The boy asked. He's a grandson of Krishna. Do you have any questions? Aniruddha couldn't think of anything. He had already forgotten his name, and Prabhupada said he could go. Later, Prabhupada called for Aniruddha, but Aniruddha didn't know that it was his name being called. Aniruddha, Kirtananda said and looked at him. Swamiji is calling you. Another boy who came out received the name Uddhava. The next day, as Prabhupada was sitting in the yard, he called, Kirtananda, Upendra, Uddhava. He wanted to read them a verse he had encountered while studying Srimad Bhagavatam. Kirtananda and Upendra came and sat at Prabhupada's feet. Oh, where is Uddhava? Prabhupada asked. Upendra told him that Uddhava had gone up to the hills to look for the cows and chant to them. Upendra thought that Swamiji would be pleased to hear that his new disciple had climbed the hills just to chant to the cows. But Prabhupada shook his head unhappily. Restlessness. He had wanted the new boy to hear the verse. Jayati Jayati Devo Devaki Nandano Sao. Jayati Jayati Krishna Vrishni Vamsha Pradipa. Jayati Jayati Mega Shyamala Kamalango. Jayati Jayati Prithvi Bahar Nasho Mukunda. Prabhupada gave the translation, all glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is known as the son of Devaki. All glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the light of the Vrishni dynasty. All glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose bodily luster is like that of a new cloud and whose body is as soft as lotus flowers. All glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who walks on the planet Earth to deliver the world from the scorn of demons and who can offer liberation to everyone. After repeating the Sanskrit and the translation, he told them they could return to their duties. Prabhupada told Kirtananda he had definitely decided to go to India via New York as soon as possible. Kirtananda packed Swamiji's things to and drove Swamiji down to San Francisco to spend the night at the temple. They would leave the next morning. The temple and even Prabhupada's apartment were very hectic that night, with many devotees and guests wanting to see Prabhupada and dozens of people wanting initiation. Kirtananda advised Prabhupada not to exert himself by going down for the every evening program. Prabhupada insisted on at least going on sitting during the kirtana. When he entered the storefront, the devotees immediately stopped the kirtana, dropping down to offer obeisances. There was a hush. He commanded a new reverence. This might be the last time they would see him. They watched him during the kirtana as he played his karatalas, singing with them for the last time. The uninitiated wanted to accept him as their spiritual master tonight before it was too late. Srila Prabhupada asked for the microphone. No one had expected him to speak. Kirtananda, the only person in a position to restrain him, said nothing and sat before him like the others, submissive and expectant. Prabhupada spoke quietly about his mission. Under the order of his spiritual master, he was bringing Lord Chaitanya's movement to America. And Krishna had kindly sent him so many sincere souls. I have a few children in India from my family days, he said, but you are my real children. Now I'm going to India for a little while. Everyone fixed his attention on Swamiji as he sat before them, leaning against the Madra's covered wall, speaking softly. Suddenly, the door opened, and Ravindra Swarupa unhappily entered. Everyone knew that Ravindra Swarupa wanted to leave Krishna consciousness. He had not taken his initiation vow seriously. He wanted to move on. He did not want a spiritual master anymore. The other devotees had discouraged him, but he had persisted. They were incredulous. How could he do such a thing on the night before Swamiji's departure? Ravindra Swarupa fell to the floor to offer obeisances, but he did not rise up. Instead, he began crawling on his hands and knees toward Prabhupada. Ravindra usually had a cavalier manner, enhanced by a handsome face, long tousled hair, and a beard. But now he was wretched and sobbing and crazy. He crawled towards Prabhupada, who sat but two steps off the floor on the simple redwood dais. Prabhupada looked at him with compassion. Come here, my boy. Ravindra crawled up the steps and placed his bushy head on Prabhupada's lap. Moved the devotees watched as Prabhupada stroked Ravindra's head, and the boy cried and cried. What's wrong, my son? You don't have to be so unhappy. Ravindra bawled out, he sobbed, to reach God directly without anyone in between. Prabhupada continued to pat and stroke the boy's head. No, you continue to stay with it as if possible. Don't be a crazy fellow. Ravindra's weeping subsided and Prabhupada continued, speaking both to Ravindra and to the emotion-struck group in the room. I'm an old man, he said. I may die at any moment, but please, you all carry on this Sankirtana movement. You have to become humble and tolerant, as Lord Chaitanya says. Be as humble as a blade of grass and more tolerant than a tree. You must have enthusiasm and patience to push on this Krishna consciousness philosophy. Suddenly, Ravindra's tears were gone. He jumped up, dejectedly stood, hesitating for a moment, and then hurried out the door, banging it behind him. Ravindra Swarupa's dramatic exit from Krishna consciousness shocked the devotees. Prabhupada sat still and continued speaking to them gravely, asking them to stick together and push on the movement for their own benefit and for others. Whatever they had learned, he said, they should repeat. They realized, perhaps for the first time, that they were part of a preaching mission, a movement. They were together not just for good times and good vibrations. They had a loving obligation to Swamiji and Krishna. Prabhupada returned to his apartment, which soon became chaotic. It was late. Many people wanted initiation. Mukunda, Jayananda, and other temple leaders tried to determine which candidates were sincere. They selected candidates half a dozen at a time and allowed them into Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada sat behind his little desk, chanted on each person's bead, and returned them, giving each person a spiritual name. Kirtananda requested him to stop. Further initiations could be done through the mail, but Prabhupada said he would continue initiating whoever was present. Mukunda and Jayananda set priorities. Some persons had been waiting months to be initiated and were obviously sincere. Others would have to be turned away. John Carter. At the end of the lecture, I was sure that I wanted to be initiated. Of being initiated by mail, I knew I wanted to have that personal connection with my spiritual master and be personally shaped by him, personally accepted. I ran up to Mukunda. I said, "How many are on the list? I would like to get on the list." He said, "Well, Swamiji isn't really taking them in any particular order. We are just going to try to pick out the most sincere people." "Please put my name on the list," I said. "I'm really sincere. I really want to get initiated." So he put me down and took the list up to Swamiji, and Swamiji began calling for people one by one. After the third person, when my name was not called, I became a little worried. Then after the fourth person, I was really sitting on edge. And when they called the fifth person and it wasn't me, I was totally destroyed. I felt, oh, he's going to India and then he's going back to Krishna. I just lost my chance. This is it. There is no use in me living anymore. I was trying to make it to the coat rack and get my coat and get out before anybody could see me crying. I had not started crying, but I could tell it was coming. A couple of people patted me on the back and said, "It's all right. He can write you a letter and tell you your name." All I could think was, yeah, the way he was talking tonight, it may never happen. I could barely stand up. I went outside and started walking across the parking lot towards the Golden Gate Park. I was kind of heading towards the Golden Gate Bridge. I thought, I'll just jump off. I had not been there long enough to understand that if you commit suicide, you have to become a ghost. I just figured my life was useless. I got about halfway across the parking lot when the idea struck me. What if he decided to take one more and I was out here somewhere? The thought filled me with so much hope that I turned around and ran back to the temple. And just as I was walked in the front of the temple, Janaki ran down and said, "He will take one more." And she grabbed somebody else and ran up the stairs. I felt my knees start to collapse and tears come jetting out of my eyes. Harashani was standing there and she grabbed me by the arm and said, "Come on with me." She raced up the stairs, pulling me to the top and burst into Swamiji's room without even knocking. Swamiji looked up with amazement. She said, "Swamiji, you have to initiate this boy." I was just bowing and Swamiji began to laugh. He said, "It's all right. Don't cry. Everything will be all right." He chanted on my beads and gave me the name Jivananda. The next morning, Prabhupada had to leave his affectionate followers. Several cars filled with devotees accompanied him to the San Francisco airport. Nandarani. Some were sincere and some were crying because it was appropriate to cry when the spiritual master leaves. Actually, none of us really knew much about what the spiritual master was. Janaki mischievously stole the ticket and passed from Prabhupada's hand. "Now you can't go," she said. "That's all right," he smiled. "I already have my boarding ticket. I'm Indian. They will let me into my own country." Prabhupada turned to his adoring followers and gathered close around him at the boarding gate. "Actually, I have only one desire, and whoever does this will please me very much. Now I have a temple in New York, in Montreal, and a temple in San Francisco, but we do not have any temple in Los Angeles." He told them to remain in Krishna consciousness and to please preach. They watched as he turned and walked through the gate, his cane in one hand, boarding pass in the other. In New York, there was hardly time for sadness. Srila Prabhupada telegraphed Sri Krishna Pandit that his arrival in Delhi would be on July 24th at 7:30 a.m. and that Sri Krishna Pandit should prepare Prabhupada's quarters at the Chipivada temple. In the telegram, Prabhupada mentioned his intention to consult a physician in Delhi and then go to Vrindavana. He was anxious to return to Vrindavana. The day before his departure, Prabhupada wrote to Sumati Morarji. In reply to his last letter, she had agreed to provide free steamship passage to India for him, but not for his disciples. As I had arranged for your passage to America, she had written, I think it is my duty to see that you return back to India safely, more so due to your indifferent health. But she would not allow free passage for his disciples. On July 20, Prabhupada wrote, I'm feeling too much to return to Vrindavana, to the lotus feet of Vrindavana, Bihari, Lord Krishna, and therefore I have decided to return to India immediately. I would have liked to return via sea, as you have so kindly offered me passage in your letter. But in my precarious state of health, that is not possible. So by the mercy of Krishna and through the one friend of here, somehow or other, I have received air passage. And I'm expecting to leave here for New Delhi on Saturday next, reaching the Palama airport on 24th instant at 7:30 a.m. Here, from India, I shall proceed to Vrindavana after a few days' rest in Delhi. I can understand that at the present you cannot follow free passage to my disciples. You cannot allow free passage to my disciples. But if you don't do so, at least in the near future, then my mission will be half finished or failure. I'm just enclosing one letter of appreciation for one of my principal students, Bruce Scarf, from Professor Davis Heron, and another from Professor Roberts of New York University. I think these letters will convince you how much my movement of Krishna consciousness is taking ground in the Western world. The holy name of Hare Krishna is now being chanted not only in this country, but also in England, Holland, and Mexico, and I know of. It may be even more widespread. I have sent you one gramophone record, which I hope you may have received by this time. You will enjoy to learn how Krishna's holy name is being appreciated by the Western world. Achyutananda told Prabhupada he wanted to go to India to study intensively, gather experiences, and become attached to Krishna. He had heard Prabhupada say that one could become more Krishna conscious in 2 days in Vrindavana than in 10 years in America. Do you think I'll be able to go? Achyutananda asked. Rest assured, Prabhupada told him, we will meet again in Vraja. Devotees had been asking Satsvarupa to transfer his civil service job to Boston and open a Krishna conscious center there. They had also asked Rupanuga to do the same in Buffalo. Satsvarupa and Rupanuga approached Prabhupada to find out what he wanted. He became very pleased. Subala was going to open center in Santa Fe, he said, and Dayananda was going to Los Angeles. Hare Krishna mantra is like a big cannon, he told them. Go and sound his cannon to everyone he can, so everyone can hear it, and it will drive away Maya. The devotees wanted to ask, but what if you don't return? They were fearful. What if Krishna kept Swamiji in Vrindavana? But what if Swamiji never returned? How could they survive against Maya? But Swamiji had already assured them that whatever Krishna consciousness he had given them would be enough, even if he never returned. Just 30 minutes before he had to leave for the airport, Prabhupada sat in his room, chanting on the beats of a girl who had asked to be initiated. Then, as he had done many times before, he left his apartment, went downstairs, crossed the courtyard, and entered the storefront. Sitting on the old carpet, he spoke quietly and personally. I may be going, but Guru Maharaj and Bhaktivinoda are here. He looked toward the painting of his spiritual master and Bhaktivinoda Thakura. I have asked them so kindly take care of all of you, my spiritual children. The grandfather always takes care of the children much better than the father. So do not fear, there is no question of separation. The sound vibration fixes up together, even though the material body may not be there. What do we care for this material body? Just go on chanting Hare Krishna, and we will be packed up together. You will be chanting here, and I will be chanting there, and this vibration will circulate around this planet. Several devotees rode with Prabhupada in the taxi, Brahmananda in the front with the driver, Raya Rama, and Kirtananda in the back beside the spiritual master. When Kirtananda sees Vrindavana, Prabhupada said, he will not be able to understand how I could have left that place and come to this place. It is so nice. There are no motor cars like here, rushing whoosh, whoosh, and smelling. Only there is a Hare Krishna, everybody always chanting. Thousands and thousands of temples. I will show you, Kirtananda. We will walk all around there, and I will show you. Brahmananda began to cry, and Prabhupada patted him on the back. I can understand that you are feeling separation, he said. I'm feeling for you and my Guru Maharaj. I think this is what Krishna desires. You may be coming there to me and be training up, and we will spread this movement all over the world. Raya Rama, you will go to England. Brahmananda, you want to go to Japan or Russia. That's all right. The devotees converged from the Air India waiting room near the crowded cocktail lounge. Wearing a sweater, his chadara folded neatly over the shoulder, Prabhupada sat in a chair. His disciples sat closely and possible around his feet. He held an umbrella, just as when he had first come alone to New York, almost 2 years ago. Although exhausted, he was smiling. Prabhupada noted a mural of Indian women carrying large jars on their heads, and he called the name of the young girl who had recently gone with her husband, Hamsadutta, to join the ISKCON Center in Montreal. Himavati, would you like to go to India and learn to carry this water pot like the Indian women? Yes, yes, she said, I will go. Yes, Srila Prabhupada said, someday we will all go. Kirtananda was carrying a portable battery-operated phonograph and they took on 2 copies of the Hare Krishna mantra record. Kirtananda, Prabhupada asked, why not play the record? They will enjoy. Kirtananda played the record very softly. Its sound catching the attention of people in the cocktail lounge. Make it a little bit louder, Prabhupada asked, and Kirtananda increased the volume. Prabhupada began nodding his head, keeping time. Soon the devotees began humming along with the record and then quietly singing, until gradually they were singing loudly. Kirtananda, Brahmananda, and other devotees began to cry. Hamsadutta. I was sitting right next to Swamiji, and all the time I was thinking, oh, my spiritual master is going to India. And he said, I want to die in Vrindavana. We all knew Swamiji was going, but now it was the last moment. I was also seeing that I had not done anything for my spiritual master. He doesn't even know who I am, I thought. There is no relationship. I must do something. I must do something now. I must serve him in some way which will establish some place in his heart, something. I was thinking. What can I do? I was crying. He did not even look at me. It was like I wasn't even there, just like a chair or something. He was just always looking around and everything, and I was trying to catch his eye. If all of a sudden he would say something. The kirtana was getting heavier and heavier, and so was the crying. The people in the waiting room were just looking at Swamiji like he was someone very special. And in the middle of it all, Swamiji was completely relaxed, as if this were the place of this was just normal thing to do. As if this were his place and this was normal, just a normal thing to do. When the record ended, Hamsadutta asked, Swamiji, can I take a collection? Prabhupada nodded. Hamsadutta stood and made a little speech. Our mission is to spread Krishna consciousness. We have a temple in New York. We're always badly in need of money. Please help us. Borrowing a hat from a soldier, Hamsadutta went around taking a collection. Our traveling is very auspiciously beginning, Prabhupada said. We had a nice kirtana and we had a nice collection. It's all Krishna's mercy. Then it was time to board the plane. Prabhupada embraced each of his men. They stood in a line and one after another approached him and embraced him. He patted a few of women on the head. Rupanuga, Swamiji was embracing the men, Kirtananda, Brahmananda, Gargamuni. I never expected that he would ask me to step forward. I did not consider myself in the same category with the other devotees. So I was very much surprised when Swamiji motioned to me and spoke my name, Rupanuga. I got up and walked to Swamiji. It might have been 10 feet, but it seemed like a long distance. I embraced him, and that embrace was the most memorable embrace of my life. Right away, I noticed Srila Prabhupada's strength. He was so strong, it was like embracing a young man, a man my age. I was 27, and he seemed even stronger and younger than I. And he hugged me tightly, and I also embraced him very firmly. He was smaller than me in stature, so I instinctively buried my chin in the hollow of his left shoulder. While I was embracing him, I felt very blissful, and I felt a light. I felt there was a light, something bright and pure, some kind of energy emerging from his face. I opened my eyes and I saw Kristananda watching. He was standing behind Swamiji, a few feet away, and I looked right into his eyes, and I was so happy and blissful that it reflected in him somehow. He broke into a big smile, smiled at me, and his eyes were very bright. It was as if some spiritual energy was actually emanating from me. That airport scene was a very important part of my life because for me, a person who always had difficulty in loving another person, Swamiji's leaving forced out a lot of love from my heart. I did not even know was there. It's like becoming a spiritual person when you feel love really developing for a spiritual master. I was becoming a spiritual person. It was a tremendous outpouring of feelings of separation and grief at his departure because we all knew he was our life and soul. And to a person, none of us, we are sure we would ever see him again. Accompanied by Kirtananda, whose head was shaven and who wore an incongruous black woolen suit, Prabhupada walked slowly toward the gate. As he disappeared from view, the devotees ran for the observation deck to get the last look at his departing plane. A gentle rain was washing the airfield, and as the devotees raced across the wet observation deck, there below were Prabhupada and Kirtananda walking towards their plane. Abandoning the quorum, the devotees began to shout. Prabhupada turned and waved. He climbed the movable stairway, turning again at the top and raising his arms, and then entered the plane. The devotees chanted wildly, while the boarding steps moved away. The door closed and the plane began to turn. The devotees had pressed close to the rail, but they pulled back as the jet exhaust blasted them with the heat. With a great roar of the Air India jet, lights blinking, taxied out to the runway. The devotees continued to chant Hare Krishna until the plane left the ground, became a speck in the sky, and then disappeared. Chapter 27, India Revisited, Part 1. The plane flew during the night and arrived in London by morning. Srila Prabhupada had planned a stopover. He checked into an airport hotel, took his massage, and rested. In the afternoon, he rose and bathed, and then he and Kirtananda boarded their plane bound for New Delhi via Moscow. While the plane was still on the ground, however, a crew member announced a short delay due to health regulations. A passenger who had disembarked earlier that day was now sick, apparently with smallpox, so the plane would have to be thoroughly fumigated. Prabhupada and Kirtananda stayed in the inner room at the Excel Hotel for the night. Early the next morning, July 24, seated in his hotel room, complete with air conditioning and television, neither of which he had used, Srila Prabhupada wrote a letter to Brahmananda in New York. Accept my blessing. I'm always thinking of your separation feeling. Please do your duty nicely and Krishna will help you in all respects. We were delayed here for 16 hours, starting this morning at 9 for Delhi. This attention to Mr. B.K. Nehru, the ambassador of India, was drawn to me the other day. I have told him about my permanent visa and he was promised to help me when I come back. Please make an appointment with him, informing that I wish to present him our set of Bhagavatam and our other literatures. Then go to him and personally present the books, etc. at Washington, D.C. It may be that as soon as I feel some strength, I shall be coming back. Up to now, there was no disturbance about my health, and I hope to reach Delhi this night. I shall write you again after reaching Vrindavan. Convey my ardent affection and blessings for all the boys and girls. I'm very much hopeful of my movement. Please keep steady. Follow all my instructions scrupulously. Chant Hare Krishna, and Krishna will give you all strength. Prabhupada and Kirtananda flew to Moscow. There, they walked around the terminal, observing what Prabhupada called propaganda pictures. After 1 hour stopover, they reboarded and flew another 8 hours, arriving in Delhi around midnight. The wall of heat that greeted them felt good to Prabhupada. He had come for this. Inside the airport terminal, overhead fans stirred the Magriya as Prabhupada and Kirtananda stood in slow-moving lines, while uniformed clerks checked passports and custom forms, without business-side computers or efficiency. Just beyond the years of immigration and customs, people waiting for arriving passengers were waving, calling, and coming together with friends and family members. After Prabhupada and Kirtananda claimed their luggage had cleared customs they stood on the sidewalk outside the terminal. Although Prabhupada had removed his sweater, Kirtananda stood sweltering in his black wool suit. It was 2 a.m. All around, passengers were meeting loved ones who embraced them, and sometimes even garlanded them and helped them into cars or taxis. But no one was there for Prabhupada. It was totally different from the recent tearful airport scenes where Prabhupada had been with his loved ones. Now, instead of being surrounded by loving disciples, Prabhupada was besieged by taxi drivers and porters wanting to carry his luggage for a fee. In Hindi, Prabhupada asked one of the drivers to take them to Chipivada in Old Delhi. The driver put their luggage in the trunk, and Prabhupada and his disciples climbed into the back seat. The small ambassador taxi drove through the streets well known to Sri Prabhupada. Nighttime traffic was light, an occasional taxi or motor rickshaw. Mostly the streets were empty and quiet, the shops closed, and the occasional person with or cow sleeping outdoors. Just a few years before, Prabhupada had sold back to Godhead magazines, solicited donations, and printed his Srimad Bhagavatam here. In those days, he had been alone, practically without money or residence. Yet he had been happy, completely dependent on Krishna. But India's leaders were rejecting Vedic culture and imitating the West. Although some Indians still professed to follow Indian culture, mostly they were victims of hodgepodge teachers who did not accept Krishna as the supreme personality of Godhead. So he had felt obliged to leave to go and transplant the Vedic culture in the West. He had held strictly to the vision of his predecessor spiritual masters, and he had been proven right. The West was very good field for Krishna consciousness. As the taxi drove through Delhi and approached Chabri Bazaar, Prabhupada saw the printing on paper shops now closed for the night, and the usual tense traffic of human-hauled cars was now absent. Though some laborers were sleeping on their carts till the morning when they would bathe in an outdoor well and begin another day's hauling. When Srila Prabhupada had been overseeing the publishing of his first volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam, he had daily walked these streets, buying paper, picking up proofs from the printer, returning with the corrected proofs. His first canto had been a triumph. Chavri Bazaar led to side streets that led to the narrow lanes of Chipavada, where upright metal posts blocked autos and rickshaws from entering. The driver stopped the taxi on an empty road and turned for his payment. Prabhupada took from his billfold 40 rupees, the same 40 rupees he had carried with him on the boat to America in 1965. But the driver took the entire 40 rupees and said he would keep it all as the just fare. Prabhupada protested. The fare should not be even half that. Loudly they argued back and forth in Hindi. The driver had pocketed the money and would give no change. Prabhupada knew that to get a policeman at the Sahara would be very difficult. Finally, although this had been nothing less than a robbery, Prabhupada let the man go. He cheated me, Prabhupada said. He and Kirtananda took their luggage and walked the last block up to the door of Chipavada Radha Krishna temple. It was locked. As they pounded loudly, Prabhupada called for Sri Krishna Pandit until a man came to the door, recognized Prabhupada and led them in. The man showed them upstairs and unlocked the door for Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada turned on the light. The room was bare and dusty, and the bulb hanging from the ceiling created stark light and shadows. On the floor was 3-foot-high cement dome, indicating that directly below here were the altar and the deities of Radha and Krishna. The dome prevented anyone from accidentally committing the offense of walking directly above the deities. The closet was stacked with printed Srimad Bhagavatam pages, Srimad Bhagavatam dust jackets, and form letters to prospective members of League of Devotees. Everything was just as Prabhupada had left it. This is the room where I compiled Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada told Kirtananda. I slept here, and over here was my cooker and my typewriter. I would sleep and type and cook and type and sleep and type. Kirtananda was shocked to think of Swamiji living here in such a poor, humble place. It wasn't even clean. Although Kirtananda was uncomfortable with his suit and wondered when he would be able to get rid of it, he managed to get a thin mattress for Swamiji. Two Ayurvedic doctors came. They both agreed that the trouble was Swamiji's heart, but that the danger was now past. They gave him medicines and advised him to keep on to a regulated schedule of eating, resting, and working. Sri Krishna Pandit came by. He sat and conversed, but Prabhupada told him of his success in America and of all the young devotees in New York and San Francisco. Prabhupada played his record for Sri Krishna Pandit, and this drew a crowd of curious persons from other rooms in the temple. In the afternoon, Prabhupada developed a cough. It didn't seem serious, and he said he wanted to travel the next day to Vrindavana. But by evening, his cough had become persistent. He could not rest. Kirtananda tried massages and the pills the Ayurvedic doctors had prescribed, but nothing worked. Prabhupada remained awake till all night, and when Kirtananda touched him in the morning, he was feverish. The doctors came again. Prabhupada's temperature was over 104. They gave teas and Ayurvedic powders while Kritananda looked on skeptically. Because Prabhupada was having a lot of difficulty breathing, when he lay down, Kritananda thought it might be pneumonia. So Kritananda gave him penicillin, of which he had brought a supply. In the afternoon, an elderly sick doctor who practiced Western medicine came and gave Prabhupada the penicillin injection. Prabhupada then fell asleep and rested quietly for the first time in 24 hours. While Prabhupada slept, Kirtananda wrote a letter to his godbrothers in New York. I know you would like me to say straight out of my opinion as how he is, and that is not good. The outcome, as always, but now very apparently, is only in Krishna's hands. Please chant Hare Krishna, for that is the only thing that can save him. This is what saved him before, and that can do it again. I know that his task is not yet complete, and by Krishna's mercy, he can again be spared. Kirtananda also asked the New York devotees to call the devotees in San Francisco, Santa Fe, and Boston, and have them continue chanting for Swamiji's help. He reminded them to strictly follow all of Swamiji's instructions. The next day, Srila Prabhupada fever was down to 100.6. He was still sick, but he talked again to going to Vrindavana. He dictated a letter to his book-selling agents in Delhi at Marama and Sons, asking them for an up-to-date account on their sales of his Srimad Bhagavatam. All the acquaintances came by and were disappointed to find Swamiji unable to accept their invitations. Prabhupada asked that they invite Kirtananda in his stead. For several days, Kirtananda visited homes of these pious Hindus. He played the record on his portable phonograph, chanting along and dancing with his arms upraised. Then he would give a short speech. His host accepted him as a sadhu, fascinated that an American had taken so seriously to Krishna consciousness.
Namo Vishnupadaya, Krishna Prastaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane, Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pracharane, Nirvishesha Sanyavari Pastyata Desatarane, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Reading in Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, chapter 27. Prabhupada stayed in his old rooms at the Radha Damodar temple, still incapacitated. He was being massaged and cared for by Kirtananda, who himself was listless and tired from the heat. But Prabhupada continued to range from one active and ambitious vision for his youthful Krishna consciousness movement to another. He would think aloud about the volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam ready to be published. If Macmillan would take them, and the boys could act on his behalf. There was so much to do. He wanted to return by October and oversee things personally. Temperatures rose to more than 110 degrees, and Prabhupada and Kirtananda had to stay inside with the doors shut and the overhead fan on. Although Kirtananda could barely perform his duties, Prabhupada found the heat bracing and said that it was restoring his health. Then, after the first week, the monsoon rains began and the heat broke. On August 10th, Kirtananda rode home again. God, is it a hot place? But at last the rains have started again and there is some relief from the heat. You can believe me when I say it was hot, but now it is raining a great deal of the time. And that has made the weather quite comfortable for me, but unfortunately not for Swamiji. Also, I have developed the inevitable case of dysentery, which has been persisting for about a week now. Yesterday began the festival of Julian, in which Radha and Krishna come out and swing for about 5 days. So I made the rounds of about half a dozen temples here. Some of them are extremely beautiful inside, although most are small. Still, I can say this with all truthfulness and sincerity, that none are so transcendently beautiful and spiritual as 3720 Park Avenue, Montreal. And I think even Swamiji would agree with me there. Kirtananda's letter gave heart to the devotees back home and confirmed our suspicion. It was not Hinduism, India. It was Swamiji and chanting Hare Krishna that was sustaining their spiritual life. As Prabhupada's spiritual children wrote from the fledgling centers in half a dozen cities in North America, he would reply, Vrindavan is an inspiration only, but our real field of work is all over the world. Even if I die, you are my future hopes and you will do it. I am feeling much for you all. Please let the ball roll on, just as it is set. Brahmananda wrote from New York asking for an explanation of why Swamiji, a pure devotee, was suffering serious illness. Swamiji had explained that conditioned souls and even beginning devotees are attacked by Maya. But was Swamiji also being attacked by Maya? On August 14th, Srila Prabhupada replied, don't be afraid of my being attacked by Maya. When there is fight between two belligerent parties, it is always expected there will be some reverses. Your country and the Western world is mostly under the grip of Maya and the modes of nature and passion and ignorance. And my declaration of war against Maya is certainly a great battle. Maya saw me very successful within 1 year, so that I got so many sincere young followers like yourself and others. So it was a great defeat to the activities of Maya. Western country youngsters giving up illicit sex, intoxication, meeting, and gambling. There's certainly a great reverse in the activities of Maya. Therefore, she took advantage of my old age weakness and gave me a death dash. But Krishna saved me. Therefore, we should thank more Krishna than eulogize Maya. So far as my present health is concerned, I think I am improving. At least I am taking lunch better than in New York. So as soon as I am a little fit to return to the field of battle, I shall again be in your midst. Srila Prabhupada envisioned an American house, a place where resident disciples could study Sanskrit and Vaishnava literature in Vrindavan. When he had suffered a stroke, he had said that Roy Ram should finish the translation of the Bhagavats. He had also requested Achyutananda, Gaurasundara, and others to learn Sanskrit, Bengali, and Hindi, so that if he did not recover, they could carry on his work. And he hoped that some of his leading men, like Brahmananda, Hayagriva, and Rai Ram, would come to India, obtain property, and establish his American house. Even if I am well, he wrote on September 9th, it is not possible for me to look after the affairs of the American house. Oriental philosophy. Swami Ban Maharaj's Institute was a provincial college, about 300 students, located in Vrindavan and affiliated with Agra University. It was what is known in India as a degree college, an institution geared toward improving the economic condition of its graduates by making them eligible for better jobs. When Srila Prabhupada and Kirtananda visited Swami Ban Maharaj at the Institute of Oriental Philosophy, Swami Ban received them in a clear parlor furnished with chairs, couches, and a radio. Swami Ban, wearing leather slippers, shorts visible through his thin dhoti, and an iron shirt with brass studs, appeared suave and sophisticated. An educated man with straight, neatly parted, graying hair. Although a resident of Vrindavan in the 1930s, he had spent several years in England, where he had been received by members of the royal family and had lectured at a number of colleges. But he had aroused no lasting interest. When Prabhupada had been struggling alone in New York, in 1965, he had written to Swami Ban asking for help. But Swami Ban had not responded. Even now, as Prabhupada told him of the work in America, Ban Maharaj did not have much to say, but he was interested in the prospect of Americans coming to live and study at his institute. Foreign students would enhance the prestige of the institute in the eyes of the government. He said the students could possibly be accommodated free of charge. Encouraged by the meeting with Ban Maharaj, Prabhupada wrote several letters to disciples, inviting them to come and study Sanskrit. If you want to learn Sanskrit, there is ample opportunity in this institute. We had some preliminary talks and it is hopeful that Swami Ban can give us some land for our own building. But even so, arrangements can be made with the existing facilities so that there would be no difficulty for students who come here to study Sanskrit and the Goswami literature. It is a good opportunity for our students, and I shall be very glad to learn how many of you desire to come. On Janmashtami Day, August 28th, Srila Prabhupada awarded the Order of Sannyas to Kirtananda in a ceremony in the Radha Damodar temple. Kirtananda thus became Srila Prabhupada's first disciple to become a sannyasi. Kirtananda Swami. During the initiation, hundreds of visitors were present, observing the birthday of Lord Krishna, and many of them came to congratulate the young sannyasi. Some said he looked like Lord Chaitanya. Srila Prabhupada wrote, he will be going back to the States very soon to begin preaching work with greater vigor and success. In the meantime, I shall try to utilize this white sannyasi for recruiting some members in India. Early in September, Achyutananda arrived in Delhi. A Hindu lady gave him 5 rupees, and he took the train to Mathura, where he got directions to the Keshavaji Gaudiya Math. Narayan Maharaj, a friend of Prabhupada's, took Achyutananda under his care, and after showing him the hall where Prabhupada had taken sannyas in 1959, put him on a bus to Vrindavan with an old gentleman for an escort. Accompanied by this escort, Achyutananda arrived by rickshaw before the Radha Damodar temple. Achyutananda walked into Prabhupada's room and fell prostrate at his feet. Oh, Prabhupada said, you are here. When Achyutananda looked up, he saw that Swamiji had a 5-day beard and was wearing only one piece of cloth wrapped around his waist from behind, crossed over his chest, tied behind his neck. Prabhupada smiled, apparently in good health. Kirtananda also greeted Achyutananda and showed him his new danda. For Achyutananda, the most wonderful thing about Swamiji in Vrindavan was the simplicity of his life. Although in New York, Swamiji had worn simple robes, he had always been regal, a guru, but here he lived very simply and humbly. Once, when he sat down on the veranda outside his room to wash his hands, his body instantly became covered with flies. Kirtananda and Achyutananda were always being bothered by the flies. This was the rainy season, but Prabhupada scarcely noticed them and sat quietly washing his hands. Kirtananda and Achyutananda agreed that Swamiji wasn't just another Vrindavan Babaji. There was no one else like him. Certainly, Gaurachandra Goswami, proprietor of the Radha Damodar temple, wasn't like Swamiji. He wore thick glasses and could barely see. And when Kirtananda and Achyutananda went before the deities in the temple, Gaurachandra Goswami asked them loudly, so how do you like them? Which one do you like the best? I like them all, said Achyutananda. I like that big one on the end there, said the priest, pointing in an offhand manner at the deity of Krishna. It looks a bit like General Chowdhury. The Swami's boys exchanged looks. What kind of guys are these? And went back to Swamiji for an explanation. They are caste Goswamis, Prabhupada explained. The original Goswamis, such as Jiva Goswami, who established the Radha Damodar temple, had engaged householders to worship the deities. And these caste Goswamis were descendants of those first householder pujaris. Prabhupada explained that the caste Goswamis were the proprietors of the temples, and they maintained the temples and ran deity worship as a business to support their families. Several years ago, each of the deities now in the order had his own temple, land, income, and priests, but for economy, the Goswamis had sold the property, reduced the opulence of worship, and amalgamated deities. There were many other interesting characters. An old widow, Sarojini, with bald head and shika and calloused bare feet, who slept in a room by the gate of the temple and swept Swamiji's kitchen and watched his clothes. Panchudas Goswami, the temple proprietor's son, who always chewed pan and went around sleepy-eyed in a silk dhoti with a red embroidered border, and dark old Babaji who came at night, who was constantly laughing and who made sandalwood paste for Swamiji. The local herbal doctor, Vanamali Kaviraj, who presided brightly smiling from behind a desk in a tiny chamber, filled from ceiling to floor with little bottles, and a famous pundit who visited Swami and wore gold-linked tulsi necklace and diamond rings. All of these persons were devotees, residents of holy Vrindavan, but no one was like Swamiji. Kirtananda Swami even became disappointed that no one else in Vrindavan was like Swamiji. In the land where everyone was an Indian and everyone was a devotee, Swamiji was still unique. No one else had so simple, so grave, so able to penetrate through falsity, so attracted to the heart, or so absolutely attached to Krishna. No one else could lead them. If Kirtananda Swami and Achyutananda were doubtful about some of the residents of Vrindavan, some of the residents of Vrindavan were also doubtful about them. When a European hippie couple wandered into Vrindavan one day, Achyutananda accompanied them to some of the temples. But at the Raghunath temple, they were refused entry. Achyutananda told Prabhupada, who replied, "That's because you went with those fools." When Prabhupada walked in the streets, people regularly nodded to him with respect, saying, "Dandavat Maharaj," but they were cautious about accepting his American followers as Vaishnavas. Srila Prabhupada, accompanied by his two disciples, again visited Swami Ban. Writing to Swami Ban's institute by rickshaw, Prabhupada told Achyutananda that Swami Ban had started the institute as an academy of Vaishnava studies, but had affiliated with Agra University because the institute had not been bringing in any money. Now Swami Ban had money, but the institute had become an ordinary school, devoid of spiritual value. As Srila Prabhupada and his disciples sat in Swami Ban's parlor, Ban Maharaj made it clear that although he would not donate land for Prabhupada's American house, Prabhupada's students could come and study at his institution. Achyutananda, he suggested, could be the first one. Swami Ban then took them to the main building to visit a class in session. Instead of seeing pundits and brahmacharis studying Sanskrit as they had expected, Prabhupada's disciples saw boys with thin mustaches and giggling girls. Prabhupada lectured and then asked Kirtananda to play the Hare Krishna record. After a few minutes, Ban Maharaj told Kirtananda to stop the record, but seeing Swamiji enjoying the record, let it play. Achyutananda, we walked around the place and I thought, this is just a mundane school. I don't want to go here. If I could learn Sanskrit and live at the Radha Damodar temple, then I could have a nice time in India. They continued their tour of the facilities, and after seeing the dormitory, Prabhupada doubted whether his American disciples could endure the austerity and the academic studies. It seemed that one of the two boys was always sick. First, Kirtananda Swami had gotten dysentery, then something had been wrong with Achyutananda's stomach, then they had both been exhausted from the heat. On the whole, Srila Prabhupada wrote to Panuga, New York, "The American boys who come here become first depressed. So I do not know how far American House in Vrindavan will be successful." His boys were not particularly studious or austere. Besides, both Kirtananda Swami and Achyutananda had developed a definite dislike for the rector of the Institute of Oriental Philosophy, and Srila Prabhupada obviously had reservations about the place. "You can go and study there," Prabhupada told them, "but don't live there. Live at the Radha Damodar temple and go. You can get bicycle and go there." Gradually, the idea of immediately acquiring an Indian house, an American house in Vrindavan began to dwindle. Prabhupada needed his own place for his disciples, and that would take time. With regular medication, massages, rest, and the heat of Vrindavan, Prabhupada felt himself recovering. By mid-September, he declared himself 90% fit to return to the United States. He predicted that he would be back there by the end of October. B.R. Sridhar Maharaj, Prabhupada's godbrother, whose ashram was in Navadvip, West Bengal, wrote to invite Prabhupada to spend the month of Kartik with him at the ashram and join him for his Vyasa Puja celebration. Srila Prabhupada liked the idea of going to the holy land of Navadvip, where Lord Chaitanya had spent his early years, and seeing his godbrother. He also wanted to visit Delhi again and inquire about printing his books. "Swamiji," Achyutananda asked, "when you go to Navadvip, am I supposed to stay here in Vrindavan and study? Don't you want to see the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya?" Prabhupada asked. Achyutananda did. and Prabhupada, Kirtananda Swami, and Achyutananda left Vrindavan together and returned to the Chipawada temple in Delhi. For Prabhupada's two disciples, life at the Chipawada temple was hard. Delhi was blazing hot and lacked the charm of Vrindavan. There was water for only 2 hours a day, early in the morning, and that was only a slow trickle. They would fill 2 clay jugs for Prabhupada's room and several buckets for his bath and their own, and then there would be no more water for the rest of the day. A mongoose ran freely through the building. Do they eat snakes? Achyutananda asked. They eat snakes, said Srila Prabhupada. They eat garbage, they eat anything. Prabhupada, who regarded the heat, the lack of water, and even the mongoose as normal, was undisturbed. Several young Indian musicians in the adjacent room regularly played cinema music on their electric organ, bongo drums, and electric guitars, rehearsing for dance. Prabhupada tolerated it. Sri Krishna Pandit praised Prabhupada's work in America and his English translation of Srimad Bhagavatam. As manager of the Chipawada Radhakrishna Temple and secretary of an active Hinduism society, Sri Krishna Pandit was interested in spreading Hindu Dharma, and therefore he wanted Prabhupada to speak at the nearby Gauri Shankar Temple, one of Delhi's most popular Hindu temples. Prabhupada agreed to go and take with him Achyutananda. Kirtananda Swami had already left for the West on August 22nd. The Gauri Shankar Temple was on Chandi Chowk. After a short walk through some of the busiest, most congested streets of Old Delhi, Prabhupada and Achyutananda removed their shoes at the door and entered the temple. The main deity was Lord Shiva, but there were many others: Ram, Durga, Kali, Radhakrishna, Hanuman. The crowd stood before the elaborate altars, viewing and petitioning the various deities. Achyutananda had learned about demigod worship from Prabhupada at 26 Second Avenue. According to the Bhagavad Gita, demigods fulfill only material desires and are therefore worshipped by the less intelligent. The Vaishnava, Prabhupada had said, respects the demigods. In fact, he respects all living beings, even the ant, but he worships only the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna or Vishnu. Achyutananda had already seen firsthand that impersonalists were misleading Indians to disavow the personal form of God and accept all methods of worship as equal. Most Indians had no clear understanding of Bhagavad Gita or Krishna. Achyutananda kept this in mind as Prabhupada led him in bowing down before a few of the demigod altars. Then Prabhupada brought him before the deity of Radhakrishna. Just see, Prabhupada said, Krishna is playing his flute. As for the demigods, someone holding bows, arrows, some holding clubs, someone is holding weapons, but Radha and Krishna are just dancing, and Krishna is holding his flute. So he is the Supreme Lord. In one large room, a heavy-set man with a great white beard and wearing flower garlands sat on several pillars. Many people stood staring at him. He reminded Achyutananda of Santa Claus. Swamiji, who is that? Achyutananda asked. Some yogi, Prabhupada replied indifferently. The main lecture hall had a large painting of Lord Shiva on the wall and was crowded with people, women in colored saris and many of the men in bright turbans. Amid such a welter of rituals and worship, Achyutananda felt protected by Swamiji. They sat on the dais, and Sri Krishna Pandit introduced his friend Bhaktivedanta Swami to the crowd. Srila Prabhupada spoke in Hindi for about an hour. Walking back to Chipawada, Achyutananda wondered why Swamiji had gone to speak at a place with such hodgepodge worship. But without asking, it occurred to him that Swamiji was willing to speak about Krishna anywhere, to anyone. He hadn't come to New York City. Yeah, and what could be more hodgepodge than New York's Lower East Side? Sitting on the veranda outside his room, Prabhupada could see the huge domes of the Jama Mosque in the early evening sky. One evening, as Prabhupada sat softly chanting japa, and as Achyutananda, who had not yet memorized the Gayatri mantra, sat nearby reading it to himself, a Hindu gentleman came and conversed with Prabhupada. Achyutananda soon finished the Gayatri mantra and sat listening to his spiritual master talk in Hindi to the unknown gentleman. Achyutananda could catch only a word here or there, some mention of Ayurvedic medicine, addresses, Indian names, cities. They talked for hours. And Achyutananda wondered, who is this man who could speak so long with Swamiji? When the man left, Achyutananda asked, Swamiji, was he your godbrother? Prabhupada said, no. Is he a Swami? Prabhupada said, no. Is he one of your relatives? No. Well, who was he? He is my friend, Prabhupada answered emphatically. Sometimes Prabhupada's visitors would bring donations of cloth or fruits or even complete cooked meals in metal tiffins. One visitor, a middle-aged woman who had heard Prabhupada speak at the Gauri Shankara temple, came to Prabhupada's office in Chipawada requesting initiation. Prabhupada spoke with her, agreed, and had Achyutananda prepare a small fire sacrifice. At her initiation, he gave her the name Mukundadasi. She came daily to clean Prabhupada's room, and when she saw that his wooden peg sandals were broken, she brought him new ones. Chandrasekhar had known Prabhupada for several years and was supposed to have been his secretary, but he was a drunkard. Prabhupada suspected him of having stolen from his mailbox more than 2,000 rupees during the past 2 years. Prabhupada's Chipawada address was listed in his magazines and books, and people had been sending money for books and back had written that they were enclosing money in their letters, but Prabhupada never found any. One day he caught sight of Chandrasekhara in the building and asked him, "Where is my mailbox key?" "I believe you have it," Chandrasekhara replied, "or maybe Sri Krishna Pandit has it." Chandrasekhara was drunk. "Swamiji," Achyutananda said angrily, "maybe we should make a police case." Prabhupada shook his head. "No." "Well," Achyutananda said, "if he is not punished by the law, then in his next birth, Krishna will punish him." "That's true," Krishna agreed. Chandrasekhara looked fearfully from Prabhupada to his American disciple. "There's only one thing to do," Achyutananda said. "Shall I call the police?" "No," said Prabhupada, "I forgive him." Yet only a few days later, Prabhupada's record player disappeared, and Prabhupada suspected the drunkard, Chandrasekhara. Prabhupada brought Achyutananda with him to his bank in the Bank of Baroda to exchange some American currency. As they were about to enter the door, the guard refused them entry, thinking they were sadhus come to beg. Prabhupada was angry. He spoke loudly in Hindi to the guard, an old man with a shotgun, big strap of bullets, and a shabby semi-official uniform. "I have an account here," Prabhupada protested. Finally, the guard allowed them to enter. Prabhupada went straight to the manager and complained, "Do you think," Prabhupada said, "because I am a sadhu, I am to be regarded as a beggar?" Prabhupada told the man of his organization in America and his account in the Bank of Baroda. The manager apologized and reprimanded the guard. One day, Prabhupada sent Achyutananda to a certain restaurant. "If you want to see varieties of Indian food," Prabhupada said, "tell them you want 10 rupees of sweets and 10 rupees of salty preparations. This is called misti and nimap. And just see the varieties." Achyutananda was sick and couldn't imagine eating a lot of sweets, but he stopped by the restaurant and looked. When he returned to the temple at Chipawada, he told Prabhupada that he had seen the food, although he couldn't eat it. "Yes, but just see the varieties," Prabhupada concluded, and he explained how Krishna consciousness was personal and full of varieties, not dry. Another American disciple joined Prabhupada, Ramanuja from Haight-Ashbury. He had been initiated just before Swamiji had left San Francisco, and he sported a full black beard. Prabhupada didn't like the beard. Cautiously and indirectly, he mentioned it, but Ramanuja's beard stayed. Ramanuja carried a book about Tibetan Buddhism, and he didn't seem fixed in Krishna consciousness philosophy. But here he was, one of the looser, sentimental San Francisco devotees, ready for Indian adventures with Swamiji. Srila Prabhupada visited the wealthy Delhi industrialist, Mr. Seth Dalmia, to discuss plans for printing some of his books in India. Mr. Dalmia received him well, but gave only vague promises of help. Prabhupada also met with Hitsaran Sharma, Mr. Dalmia's secretary, who worked closely with Hanuman Prasad Podar of the popular religious publishing company Gita Press. Srila Prabhupada was already acquainted with all three gentlemen, since they had all donated toward his first volume of Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada wanted Gita Press to publish his Gita Upanishad and Srimad Bhagavatam. Hitaran Sharma showed and illustrated Gita in Hindi poetry that had been published. Right. Prabhupada still considered private message printed. We have wasted much time in the matter of editing and finding out suitable publisher. When I was alone, there were 3 volumes published during the last 2 years. I could not publish a single volume more. It is a great defeat. If I have 1 or 2 sincere souls like you, and if we can make more publications, then our mission will be a great success. I am prepared to sit down underneath a tree with 1 sincere soul, and in such activity, I shall be freed of all diseases. Devotees from America were regularly writing Swamiji, anxious to see him again in good health. But he didn't want to leave India, he explained, until he personally saw that the printing of his Gita Upanishad was underway. Printing Gita Upanishad and obtaining approval for permanent residency in the US were the 2 short-term goals he wished to achieve before returning. But he thought often of his return to America. As you are all feeling my separation, similarly, I'm also anxious to return as soon as possible. I think I am fit to go back to your country at present and as scheduled. Previously, I'm sure, by the end of October. I must be fit to return, but before this, there are many things to be done. I am not yet assured of the permanent visa. The best thing will be that from each center, an invitation should be sent that my presence is urgently required. Presently, I'm very much anxious to begin printing here if Macmillan Company does not take up the work. Please, therefore, let me know yes or no from Macmillan. If he is not serious, then immediately send the manuscript, finished or not, to the following address: Pundit Hitsaran Sharma, care of Dalmia Enterprise, Scindia House, New Delhi. After dispatching, let me know, and I shall do the needful. Indian friends who visited Prabhupada's room listened eagerly as he told them about America, the millions of cars and superhighways and thousands of young people rejecting their father's wealth. But Prabhupada's visitors weren't fully able to understand his visit to America. Not that they were too simple to understand, and not just that they had never traveled to the West. Prabhupada's experience in America consists of intimate spiritual relationships with his disciples. How could an outsider understand the dynamics of his temples and his disciples in the West? How could anyone except Prabhupada and his disciples understand these things? My mind is always with you. Practically, your country is my home now. India is a foreign country for me. The reason is that my spiritual family is there and my material relationships are here in India. Therefore, factually, where my spiritual family exists, there is my home. Srila Prabhupada's vision of a worldwide society of devotees preaching in temples and publishing books, a vision he had even before he had gone to America, was now becoming manifest. It was dependent on him. In his absence, his disciples were sustained only by carrying out his orders and receiving his letters. When Dayananda and Nandarani had gone from San Francisco temple to start the temple in Los Angeles, it had been Swamiji's instructions that had sustained and guided them. Wherever there is a new branch of our society for Krishna consciousness, I become very, very happy. And my blessings in heart and soul are with you. On receipt of Swamiji's letter, they knew they had done the right thing. No matter that husband and wife sometimes quarreled and there wasn't enough money, the main thing was Swamiji was pleased. From Boston, Satsvarup wrote that he and other devotees were moving from an apartment to a rented storefront near Boston University. The first time Satsvarup entered the new storefront, he found on the floor an aerogram from Swamiji, dated October 6th from Delhi. I can understand that you have secured a very nice place in Boston, and there is a very good possibility of pushing our movement amongst the student community there. Our movement is certainly very much appealing to the younger section of your country, and if we are successful in the matter of attracting the student community in your country, certainly this movement will scatter all over the world and fulfill the foretelling of Lord Chaitanya that in every village and every town of the world, The Lord will be famous for his glorious Sankirtan movement. Please try for this with your heart and soul, and your life will be a successful mission. The letter was as good as Swamiji coming personally to open the storefront and begin the preaching. It gave such fruit, full direction and inspiration, and it was personal. In the same letter, Prabhupada had written, I am always aspiring after returning to your care and overload you with typewriting tasks. I hope we shall very soon meet again and help each other in the matter of discharging Krishna conscious engagements. I am now 90% all right, and I think I can return safely. This typewriting work is done by me. For 2 days, I'm alone and doing everything myself as experiment. This proves that I am now well. Please offer my blessings to all the boys and girls there. In New Mexico, Subal was trying to arrange public speaking engagements for Prabhupada's return, and Prabhupada was encouraging him. If you think I can be on television by the first week in December, then you can arrange for it, because I must be in your country by the middle of November. Srila Prabhupada wrote to Janardhan in Montreal, answering his philosophical doubts and encouraging him to be patient with his spiritually reluctant wife. And to Rai Ram, who was editing Back to Godhead magazine in New York, he gave another kind of thoughtful assurance. I am very happy that since it, BTG, is entrusted to you, things are improving. This means that Krishna is giving you more and more facilities. Krishna is such a nice boss that he gives more facilities improvement to the sincere servant. On October 9th, the day Prabhupada started for Calcutta, he left behind a different kind of letter for Sri Krishna Pandit. Prabhupada had been negotiating with Sri Krishna Pandit to purchase the Chipawada temple for ISKCON, or at least to rent a single room through a formal contract. Prabhupada wanted the room as the Delhi headquarters for printing his books. On the day of his departure, however, Sri Krishna Pandit was unavailable, and Prabhupada left him a short handwritten note. If you're not settling anything with the room, then I may not come back to Delhi anymore. I will go to USA directly from Calcutta via the Pacific route, for which Sri Dalmia Seth has already promised for the ticket. Chapter 28, India Revisited, Part 2. Prabhupada's train, the Kalka Mail, pulled into Delhi station. Prabhupada and his 2 disciples had tickets with reserved seat numbers, but no car number. So while Prabhupada waited with the baggage, Achyutananda and Ramanuja ran from one end of the train to the other looking for their car. After they had found their seats and boarded, Achyutananda untied Prabhupada's bedding and spread it open on the upper tier. Prabhupada climbed the little ladder, sat comfortably on his cotton stuffed quilt, and opened his Sanskrit Srimad Bhagavatam, while Achyutananda and Ramanuja took their seats. It would take about 24 hours to reach Calcutta. Near the end of the journey, a group of educated Bengali gentlemen struck up a philosophical conversation with the Swami. We do not worship any form, said one, speaking fluent English in a loud, deep voice. We have a marble Omkara that we worship, and we sit and pray to that. That is also a form, said Prabhupada. He was reluctant to attack their philosophical position directly. We practice karma yoga, the gentleman went on, not heeding Prabhupada's previous point, because in karma yoga, you can stay within your position. But karma yoga is not full surrender of the soul, said Prabhupada. One must come to the stage of bhakti. Oh no, the man protested. Emotionalism is very harmful. Karma yoga, Srila Prabhupada exploded. Karma yoga is for fools. Silence. Another man, not with the Bengalis, but seated beside them, spoke up. Obviously, Swamiji is a learned scholar, he said. You shouldn't argue like that. The Bengali that Prabhupada had shouted got up and moved to another seat. Later, he came back. Are you insulted, Prabhupada asked him. No, 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 he replied, but I have never heard anyone say that about the teachings of the Gita. The Bengalis then talked with Achyutananda, lighting their cigarettes and smoking freely before him, although they had not dared to do so before Prabhupada. It wasn't proper to smoke in front of a sadhu. Bengalis, Achyutananda told them, citing one of Prabhupada's examples, were very sorry that East Pakistan had been cut off from the rest of Bengal. But Krishna consciousness could elevate people to international universal consciousness. Then there wouldn't be any such division. The Bengalis appreciated Achyutananda's remark, although they continued to blow smoke in his face as the train rattled over the last miles to Calcutta. Prabhupada was greeted at Calcutta's Howrah station by relatives, mostly from his sister's family, and by devotees of the Goswami monk. About 50 people were on hand. They offered Prabhupada flower garlands and sandalwood paste, and then escorted him and his disciples into a car. Achyutananda and Ramanuja noticed that although Swamiji's sister was shorter and more rotund than Prabhupada, her facial features were strikingly similar. Her name was Baba Tarini, but Prabhupada told them to call her Pishama. And as Prabhupada rode through the streets, he saw many images of goddess Kali, 10-armed, riding a lion. Calcutta was observing the highest religious celebration in Bengal, Kali Puja, a month of festivities in honor of the goddess Kali. Throughout the city, brass bands and radio music blared, and there were decorative lights, stages, and tents. When Prabhupada arrived at Pishama's house in South Calcutta, his relatives seated him and performed an arti ceremony in his honor, reverently offering him the traditional items, incense, flaming lamp, flowers. They also bathed his feet. He sat smiling within the crowded room of relatives who were proud of his having journeyed to America on behalf of Lord Krishna. As Prabhupada's family members sang Hare Krishna Kirtan, from outside the room, the ladies of the house began to sing a high, shrill whooping sound. Achyutananda and Ramanuja were startled. Pishama had prepared a large feast, much of it cooked in mustard seed oil, for the homecoming celebration. And Prabhupada satisfied her by honoring the prasadam, even though he wasn't feeling well and was tired from the train ride. Soon after the festivities, Prabhupada and his disciples retired. Again, his health wavered, this time because of his sister's heavy cooking, and he felt a strain on his heart. He sent for an Ayurvedic doctor who taught Achyutananda how to do very gentle massage to help circulation and restricted Prabhupada from sweets. As Prabhupada recovered, he began regularly lecturing in his room during the evening. Although he spoke English for his disciples, the room was soon filled to capacity with relatives and friends. There were generally disturbances from outside due to the noises of Kali Puja. Nearby Pishama's house was a large tent, a center for evening street parties, which included a sweets counter, fireworks, and an excessively loud public address system that incongruously blared Julie Andrews singing songs from The Sound of Music. One evening, as Prabhupada spoke, "My only qualification is that I have unflinching faith in my spiritual master." A large firecracker exploded right outside the door. The audience smiled tolerantly. "Yes," Prabhupada said, taking the explosion as confirmation of his words, "it is glorious." One night, Prabhupada explained that according to Bhagavad Gita, demigod worshippers are less intelligent. People worship Kali for material rewards, he said, but since all material things are temporary, such worship is inferior to the worship of Krishna. Kali is not able to grant the worshipper liberation from birth and death. Which is better, Achyutananda asked, the worship of the Christians and Jews, which is mostly impersonal, or the worship of the non-absolute by the worshippers of Kali? Worship of Kali is better, Prabhupada said, because the worshippers are in the Vedic system. They are more likely to bow down to Radha Krishna or chant Hare Krishna than a Christian or a Jew. There is a chance that they will become Krishna devotees in the future if they lose their material attachments. Prabhupada regularly visited his God. He invited his godbrothers and their disciples to join him in America. Sometimes he seemed to do it just to get them at least to think more preaching. Bhakti ashram was no more than, but with no dynamic vision for preaching. So Prabhupada's frequent invitations, "You should go to America, come back with me," would stir them, even if they couldn't actually come. On visiting the ashram of Bhakti Saranga Goswami, Prabhupada saw that the audience consisted almost entirely of old widows, but he spoke as usual. One day, Prabhupada's godbrother, Haridas Swami, came by. He was heavy-set and loud, and he spoke very rapidly. Very happy to see you coming here from America. This is wonderful. Krishna is summa bonum, cause of all causes. I want you to come to my temple. When Haridas Maharaj went into a separate room, Prabhupada turned to Achyutananda. He wants us to go to his temple, but to go there, I'll have to go on to a rickshaw and then to tram car and then onto a train and another rickshaw. Aware of Prabhupada's weak condition, Achyutananda began shaking his head negatively. When Haridas Maharaj returned, Achyutananda said that Swamiji couldn't come to his mat. Who are you? Haridas Maharaj said angrily. You are just a brahmachari. Why should you risk your life? Achyutananda replied, I will risk my life, but I can't risk my spiritual master's life. Haridas Maharaj felt left insulted. Don't worry, Prabhupada said. He is just very talkative. Prabhupada paid a visit to B.P. Keshava Maharaj, the godbrother who had awarded him the sannyas order in 1959. Prabhupada sat on the floor and spoke in Bengali to his godbrother, who was very old and apparently on his deathbed. Prabhupada had Achyutananda sing for Keshava Maharaj. Keshava Maharaj requested Prabhupada to visit his ashram, Devananda Mat, in Navadvip. Srila Prabhupada had wanted to return to the U.S. as a permanent resident, but his students in America hadn't been able to get the necessary clearance from the U.S. Immigration Department. The devotees in Boston had gotten in touch with a few Harvard Indology professors, but obtained no signed statements about Prabhupada's importance. All of the ISKCON centers had written formal letters inviting A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami and had presented copies to the U.S. Immigration Office, but unless the devotees could produce something more impressive, like a government recommendation or university's offer for him to join their faculty, Prabhupada could not become U.S. resident. On October 13th, Prabhupada wrote to his disciples in Montreal, I am very anxious to go to Montreal. Therefore, you must try your best to get my immigration visa on the basis of my being an authorized Vaishnava minister based on Srimad Bhagavatam and Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Rather than wait indefinitely for permanent residence, Prabhupada decided to apply for a visitor's visa. He went with Achyutananda to the U.S. consulate on Harrington Road. There in the middle of Calcutta, they entered a small piece of America with everything shiny, new, and efficient, air conditioners, stainless steel water coolers, electric security doors, U.S. Marines, and American flags. Sitting before the secretary of the consulate, Prabhupada looked small and humble. I want a visa to see my students in America, he said softly. Do you have any letters? The secretary asked. Achyutananda handed over the letters from the temples. The secretary reviewed them and quickly gave Prabhupada a 4-month visa. While leaving the building, Prabhupada remarked, I will just get anything and then it can be extended. On October 19th, Prabhupada wrote Hayagriva regarding his imminent return. I am already preparing for returning to USA. I have obtained a visitor's visa the day before yesterday. Most probably I shall take the first chance to return to USA upon my return from Navadvip. In October 22nd, he wrote Umapati. You will be glad to know that I have already secured a visitor's visa to your country and have asked my travel agent to book my seat on the earliest possible date. I think I shall be in your midst by the middle of November. On October 24th, Prabhupada traveled with Achyutananda and Ramanuja to Navadvip. Although the local train took 4 hours, the lush Bengal countryside gradually revealed its heavenly beauty, and Prabhupada's health seemed to improve just from the pleasant journey. By the time they arrived at Navadvip, Achyutananda and Ramanuja were also feeling relief from the rigors of Calcutta. For the first time in weeks, they could open their eyes without blinking through drops of perspiration. A very large kirtan party of brahmacharis, mostly members of Keshava Maharaj Devananda Gaudiya Math, met Srila Prabhupada at the Navadvip train station. The brahmacharis were meticulously neat, with their robes all dyed the same shade of saffron, their Vaishnava tilak markings bold and distinct, their heads smoothly shaved, their shikas precise. They offered Prabhupada and his party aromatic garlands made from flowers resembling lotuses and gathered around Srila Prabhupada with worshipful enthusiasm. Also present were a few of Sridhar Maharaj's disciples waiting with rickshaws to take Prabhupada and his disciples to their guru's ashram. Although between the two groups there was an unspoken competition for Prabhupada's presence, he had previously agreed to go to Sridhar Maharaj's place. He promised the members of Devananda Math that he would visit them next. Soon after leaving the station, the rickshaws turned onto a road lined with lush tropical vegetation, banana leaves, tall bamboos, exotic blossoming flowers. Prabhupada saw simple villagers working near their straw and mud huts, and in the distance, the spire of Sridhar Maharaj temple. The kirtan party greeted Prabhupada at the outer gates of Sridhar Maharaj's ashram, chanting Hare Krishna and playing kartals and clay madrangas. Prabhupada entered the temple, offered obeisances before the deities of Radha Krishna, and then went to see his godbrother. Sridhar Maharaj was very old, his sight failing, his joints stiff with arthritis. He stayed mostly in his room or sometimes on his veranda, and then moved on with slow, rickety motions. He was an austere and kindly Vaishnava and smiled heartily upon seeing Prabhupada and his disciples. In fluent English, he began praising Prabhupada's preaching in America, repeatedly using Prabhupada's phrase, Krishna consciousness. Swamiji's work, he said, was the fulfillment of Lord Chaitanya's prophecy that Krishna consciousness would one day spread all over the world. He laughed and smiled and praised the Krishna consciousness movement with no trace of jealousy. So you appreciate this phrase, Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada smiled. Yes, Sridhar Maharaj replied, and the disciples of Swami Maharaj also. And he turned toward Achyutananda and Ramanuja. With very little effort, your preaching will go far. The boys were astonished. This was really something to write home about. Sitting on the roof of a temple in this jungle paradise with old Sridhar Maharaj appreciating Swamiji's work as the greatest work on behalf of Lord Chaitanya. And Swamiji sitting relaxed, grinning, making humble replies. It was the high point of the trip. My dear Satsaru, please accept my blessing. I have already duly received the invitation from Harvard University. It is understood that they are scheduling me for 20th November between 6 and 10 p.m. I can start immediately on the strength of my visitor visa, but I am awaiting for Mukunda's reply for his trying to get my permanent visa. Yesterday, we have all come to Navadvip. This place is another establishment of one of my godbrothers. It is very nice, an extensive place, and my godbrother, B.R. Sridhar Maharaj, has spared one entire nice house for our stay. He has also agreed to cooperate with our society. We shall observe his birthday ceremony tomorrow, and the brahmacharis shall learn how to celebrate the spiritual master's birthday. Vyasa Puj Day, the observance of B.R. Sridhar Maharaj's birthday was October 27th. His disciples had erected a pandal on the temple road, and about 100 people attended. Sridhar Maharaj sat on his Vyasasan, and Prabhupada and other sannyasis, all wearing flower garlands, sat in chairs next to Sridhar Maharaj. Prabhupada spoke in Bengali. Some of Sridhar Maharaj's disciples, inspired by Prabhupada's preaching about the glories of spreading Krishna consciousness in the West, delivered speeches in English as Vyasa Puja homages to their spiritual master. Sridhar Maharaj, also speaking in English, gave a very scientific lecture on Krishna consciousness and the senses. Afterwards, Prabhupada told his disciples he has very high realizations, but he is keeping them to himself. Every morning before dawn, Sridhar Maharaj set out a party of brahmacharis to perform kirtan in the villages. On Prabhupada's request, Achyutananda and Ramanuja joined them, leaving before sunrise and returning at dusk. Although Prabhupada and Sridhar Maharaj usually remained at the temple, one day they got into a rickshaw and accompanied the chanting party through the streets of Navadvip. The festival at the Devananda Math was a big affair. In contrast to Bhakti Saranga Goswami's ashram in Calcutta, where only widows had attended, B.P. Keshava Maharaj's Devananda Math had about 200 brahmacharis and 20 sannyasis. Some of the brahmacharis, however, were not full-time, but were attending school outside. So the ashram's atmosphere was a little like that of a social club. But when the kirtan and the circumambulation of the temple began, 700 people took part. The impeccably dressed sannyasis, whose every piece of saffron cloth, including their cloth-wrapped dundas, was dyed exactly the same shade, danced back and forth before the deities. A dozen sannyasis danced in a group, their dundas moving together, dipping and rising, forward and back, to the delight of the brahmacharis. Prabhupada sat on a dais with other dignitaries and spoke to the festival audience. Achyutananda, on Prabhupada's request, spoke a few words in Bengali, bringing laughs and applause. Sridhar Maharaj spoke gravely in Bengali. The sannyasi from the Devananda month, speaking for their absent leader, B.P. Keshava Maharaj, proclaimed in impassioned tones that although Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement had been predicted to spread throughout the world, no one had known how it could be possible. Now, thanks to the work of Bhaktivedanta Swami, it was happening. After a large feast in the evening, Prabhupada's party returned to Sridhar Maharaj's ashram. Sridhar Maharaj intimated to Prabhupada that the Devananda month emphasized quantity, whereas his own ashram emphasized quality. Curious as to what this meant, Achyutananda wanted to ask Prabhupada, but the time didn't seem appropriate. After 9 days in Navadvip, Prabhupada was ready to return to Calcutta and prepare for his trip back to the United States. He and his 2 disciples took rickshaws to Navadvip and caught a morning train to Calcutta. On the train, Achyutananda timidly put forward the question that had been on his mind. Swamiji, what did you and Sridhar Maharaj discuss? Oh, many, many things, Prabhupada replied. But if I were to tell you now, you would faint. After a silence, Prabhupada added, still, I offered him to be president of our society. I knew he would not accept. He is keeping things within him. Anyway, this is all beyond you. Do not have any ill feelings toward any of my God brothers. They are all great souls. There are just some differences on preaching and spreading. Even in your mind, do not feel any ill will towards them. At the same time, do not mix very thickly with them. Achyutananda suggested, maybe if these 2 sannyasis had each other's qualities combined. Ah, yes, Prabhupada said. Now you have understood me. Srila Prabhupada's intention in coming to Calcutta was simply to prepare to leave for America. He had his visitor's visa already, but he thought that if he stayed in India a little longer, in San Francisco, Mukunda might be able to secure permanent American residency for him. He went to his sister's house to spend his last days in Calcutta there, but after only a few days, he felt that the Radha Govinda deity, the deity he had worshipped in childhood, was calling him. When Srila Prabhupada had been no more than an infant, his servant used to take him and his cousin, Subhuti Mulak, on a perambulator, wheel them into the temple courtyard, and take them before the altar of Radha Govinda. And as soon as Prabhupada could walk, his father would hold his hand and take him before the deity every day. Sometimes Prabhupada would go alone and stand for hours gazing upon Radha and Krishna, who appeared very beautiful to him with their slanted eyes and fine dress and ornaments. It had been for the pleasure of Radha Govinda that as a child, beginning at the age of 5, he had performed his miniature Rath Yatra festival. Just 2 weeks ago, when Prabhupada had been staying at his sister's house, his health had prevented him from going to North Calcutta to see the deity, so he'd gone to Navadvip without taking their blessings. But now, although still weak and although preoccupied with traveling to the U.S., he felt that the deity was calling him. For the past 150 years, the Radha Govinda temple had been maintained by the aristocratic Mulaks, a branch of Prabhupada's own family. The Mulaks had owned the entire block of Harrison Road, now Mahatma Gandhi Road, and rents from the block-long building opposite the temple had financed the opulent worship of Radha Govinda. In those days, the deities had been worshipped on a gorgeous altar in the large kirtan hall, and they had been dressed in silks and ornamented with gilded and bejeweled crowns and necklaces. All the pious Vaishnava families of the neighborhood would visit, and on Janmashtami, Krishna's birthday, even British gentlemen and ladies would come. But today, the Mulak family possessed only remnants of the European art and furnishings that had once filled their homes and temples, relics from an age of former grandeur. And the worship of Radha Govinda had pitifully deteriorated. Srila Prabhupada was pained to see the neglect. No longer were Radha and Govinda the center of the Muliks' lives. The deity worship still continued, conducted by paid Brahmins, but few people came to see. The main attraction now was the golden deity of the goddess Kali on the large altar of the Kirtan hall. Radha and Govinda in the family for many generations have been relegated to a small upstairs room in the Mullik compound. Their dress was no longer elegant. Their valuable crowns and ornaments had disappeared, and there were no large kirtans as before. Only a paid Brahmin came in the morning to rub sandalwood pulp on their shining bodies, dress them carefully in whatever simple clothes remained, and place jasmine garlands around their necks, while a widow or two watched the silent proceedings. Krishna consciousness was dying in India, dying from neglect. At least it was dying here in Calcutta. And in many other places in India, even in Vrindavan, the impersonal philosophy prevailed. And grand old temples had become residences for pigeons, monkeys, and dogs. Sad as it was, it only reinforced Prabhupada's conviction of the need to return to the fertile ground in the West. Although here in India, the spirit of devotion was dying. In the West, it was just beginning to grow. New York, San Francisco, Montreal, and in Boston. If pure Krishna consciousness were dying in India, then why shouldn't it be transplanted in the fertile West? There it would flourish. It would spread worldwide and even back to India again. When India, bent on following the West, saw the materially advanced Americans taking to Krishna consciousness, she would reevaluate her own culture. Prabhupada saw a Krishna conscious revolution beginning in the United States. He didn't consider himself its creator. He was the servant of Krishna consciousness. Lord Chaitanya's desire was that every Indian help to spread Krishna consciousness worldwide. Unfortunately, the very verses in the scriptures that prophesied a worldwide Krishna consciousness movement were a puzzle even to most of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers. They admitted it. But soon they would see there was great potential in the West. Prabhupada had shown many of his godbrothers the newspaper article, Swami's Flock, chanting in Tompkins Square Park, ancient trance stands at Stanford University, and he had brought some disciples with him. These were only beginnings. Much more had to be done. And who would help? V.P. Keshava Maharaj was dying. Sridhar Maharaj couldn't come out. Who else? Most Indians were impersonalists, non-devotional yogis, or demigod worshippers. As Srila Prabhupada stood before the Radha Govinda deity, explaining to Achyutananda and Ramanuja how he had worshipped them in his childhood and how they had been his first inspiration in Krishna consciousness, he understood deeply that he must take Krishna consciousness all over the world, even if single-handedly. Of course, he was not alone. He had disciples, and they were opening new centers even in his absence. He was a hometown cousin who had done something successful in America. Narendranath Mullik, a childhood friend of Prabhupada's, called Prabhupada Dada, brother, and regularly joked with him. The Mulliks were glad to give Prabhupada and his two followers a large room in the temple compound for as long as they wanted to stay in Calcutta. Prabhupada set up his usual arrangement, a mat on the floor, a low table for a desk, and beside the desk his few possessions. Here he could study and write, receive guests or rest. Daily, some local women brought Prabhupada and his disciples some simple prasadam and a tiffin. The Kali Puja celebrations drew large crowds into the main hall before the Kali deity, and Prabhupada gave regular lectures there from Srimad Bhagavatam. He also spoke in the homes of various Mullik families. The hosts, members of the dwindling Bengali aristocracy, would offer Prabhupada and his disciples Radha Govinda prasadam, cut fruits, water chestnuts, minced ginger, and soaked salted mung beans. Most of those who came to visit Prabhupada in his room were not really interested in his spiritual life, but they wanted his blessings. There was a local Brahmin whose occupation was to go from shop to shop, carrying a few flowers, a cup of water, and a brass container with sandalwood paste and kumkum powder. Using this paraphernalia, he would offer blessing to the shopkeepers every day and receive a few paisa in payment. Knowing Prabhupada to be a Vaishnava, the Brahmin came to see him to receive a spiritual benediction. The man's forehead was decorated with both Vaishnava tilak, two vertical lines, and Saivite tilak, 3 horizontal lines. After the man left, Achyutananda asked, Swamiji, who was that? He is a hired Brahmin, Prabhupada said. When he goes to the Vaishnavas, he gives them blessings, and when he goes to the Shaivites, he gets money. He has to make a living. Another man came, asserting that he wanted to teach Prabhupada's disciples Hindi. He asked Prabhupada to help him get to America, but Prabhupada told him, you must take sannyas, then I will bring you to America. After 2 visits, the man stopped coming. A Mullik relation, a small, bald, bright-eyed man, came by one day carrying a book entitled Interesting Studies. He posed philosophical questions, simply queries about karma, jnana, and bhakti, but then would interrupt Prabhupada and answer them himself. Finally, when the man asked one of his questions, Prabhupada replied, so what is your answer? The man gave a general answer, but later when Prabhupada began explaining that Lord Krishna, the speaker of Bhagavad Gita, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the man interrupted, you may call God Krishna, call him Shiva, call him... No, Prabhupada said, Krishna is the Supreme Lord, and all others are demigods. The man became a little nervous and quoted a popular Bengali impersonalist who taught that all gods and all methods of worship are the same. He's an upstart, Prabhupada said. That is not the teaching of the Gita. What is this other teaching? It is all utter confusion. If you go on speaking like this, the man said angrily, I'll have to leave this place. Please don't criticize. This is Paramahamsa. Why not, Prabhupada said. He is a concoctor. The man got up and left, calling out, you don't know Krishna, as he left the room. Prabhupada turned to Achyutananda and Ramanuja and smiled. Every time you introduce Krishna, they say, why only Krishna? But that is what Krishna says. There's no truth superior to me. These rascal impersonalists have ruined Bengal. One day, a man gave Prabhupada a 200 rupee donation, and Prabhupada immediately asked the pujari for an old set of Radha Govinda's clothes, gave the clothes to some of the temple ladies along with the 200 rupees, and asked that the ladies make gold embroidered dresses for Radha Govinda. Radha Govinda are taking care of us, he says, so we should take care of them also. Ramanuja's beard was huge. Looking like an ordinary hippie, he misrepresented Srila Prabhupada wherever they went. Prabhupada told Achyutananda, tell your friend to shave. Achyutananda and Ramanuja talked, but Ramanuja wouldn't shave. Wanting Ramanuja to agree on his own, Prabhupada didn't ask him again. When a copy of the latest Back to Godhead magazine arrived from the States, Prabhupada got an idea. 2 illustrations in the magazine showed Haridas Thakur converting a prostitute. After her conversion, the prostitute had shaved her head. Showing the pictures to Ramanuja, Prabhupada asked, what is the difference between this picture and that picture? I don't know, Swamiji Ramanuja replied. No, Prabhupada said, pointing to the pictures. What is the difference in this picture? Oh, she's a devotee. Yes, Prabhupada said, but what else? Oh, she has a shaved head. Yes, Prabhupada smiled. A devotee has a shaved head. Do you want me to shave my head? Yes, Ramanuja shaved, but within a few days, began growing his beard and hair back. From now on, Prabhupada told Achyutananda, no more cheap initiations. They have to know something. Ramanuja hung on. Prabhupada wanted Ramanuja and Achyutananda to remain in India after his departure and to continue to try for American House in Vrindavan. Ramanuja wrote his own impressions to his friend Mukunda in San Francisco. Please be advised that we are doing all we can to get him off as soon as possible, but this primitive Indian government is putting obstacles in our way. The man who could have given Swamiji clearance for his P4 has just drowned, so the clearance has to be made in Bombay. This is the delay. Here in Calcutta, we are having lots of fun addressing different people. Swamiji makes Achyutananda and myself give short speech. I am becoming more and more expert at this. I think he makes us speak in order to show the audience that we American Vaishnavas are for real. And he wants everyone to preach Krishna consciousness. It is very difficult to take care properly of Swamiji's health here. For one thing, it is a big thing to serve sweets in India, and it is impolite to decline. Also, we get all kinds of visitors. We have not been able to go to bed before 11 o'clock, and Swamiji automatically wakes at 3. In this respect, the people here are very inconsiderate, but if Achyut and I ask them to leave, they will ask Swamiji if they should, and Swamiji, of course, says no. Anyway, his heartbeat is a little fast and sometimes alarmingly fast, so I suggest that you get a good heart specialist to see him. Please arrange for this doctor, and above all, make sure that Swamiji gets plenty of rest. You need not restrict visitors too strictly, because if the company is good, Swamiji seems to enjoy visitors. Please do all you can to get the Swamiji's beat to normal again. His chariot needs to be fixed up so that he can remain on this earth for at least another 10 years. Knowing that Swamiji would soon be returning, the devotees in America began to increase their entreaties, each group asking him to come to their particular city. On November 4th, Prabhupada wrote Mukunda, "As you say that my absence is being felt now surely more deeply than ever, so I also feel to start immediately without waiting." And to Mukunda's wife, Janaki, he wrote, "Every minute I think of you, and as you asked me to go to San Francisco, while returning from India, I am trying to fulfill my promise. I am thinking of going directly to San Francisco." At the bottom of the same letter to Mukunda and Janaki, Achyutananda added a health report. Swamiji is looking healthy and living and working regularly, but his pulse rate is generally too fast. Last night it was 95, unusually fast even for him, as it generally hovers between 83 and 86. Prabhupada decided not to wait any longer on the chance that Mukunda might secure his permanent residency. "I want to return to your country where there is good air and good water," he told Achyutananda one day. "Every day we are receiving letters that the devotees want me there. I thought that in my absence they might deteriorate, and I was reluctant to even come to India, but now I see that it is growing. There is need for me to go and supervise the expansion, so I want to go back." The only impediment now seemed to be a delayed P form, a clearance from the Bank of India required for an Indian citizen traveling abroad. "I am just ready for starting for America, but as you know, our competent government is very slow in action. The P form was submitted almost a month ago, but is undergoing red tapeism. The visa was granted to me within half an hour. The passage of money was deposited within 2 days, but unfortunately, the Reserve Bank of India is delaying the matter unnecessarily. I expect the P form at any moment, and as soon as I get it, I shall start for your country." Just to make certain that Swamiji would come first to San Francisco, Mukunda sent a telegram to Calcutta. "Swamiji, Brahmananda and I agree. You start immediately. Advise exact arrival date, Mukunda." Prabhupada had planned his route through Tokyo, intending to stop for a day to probe if there is any possibility of starting a center. In Tokyo, he would let Mukunda know by telephone his arrival time in San Francisco. But 3 weeks passed while Prabhupada continued to wait for his P form. Meanwhile, he received good news from New York. The Macmillan Company's interest in Bhagavad Gita was real. The contract was being drawn. Pleased with Brahmanand, he wrote him on November 11th, explaining his visions for distributing Krishna conscious literature. If publications are there, we can work from one center, only like New York or San Francisco, for propagating our cult all over the world. Let us stick to the publication of BTG more and more nicely and publish some Vedic literatures like Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, etc. As Prabhupada's mind turned more to the preaching that awaited him in America, he assessed what he had done so far, what he would do, and the process by which he would do it. I am not in agreement with Mr. Altman that we are expanding very thinly. In my opinion, a single sincere soul can maintain a center. You know, I started the center at 26 Second Avenue alone. I took the risk of $200 per month for rent. At that time, there were no assistants. Mukunda was at that time a friend, but there was no responsibility for him for maintaining the center. Gradually, Kirtananda and Hayagriva joined, but they did not take any responsibility. Still, I was maintaining the establishment, simply depending on Krishna, and then Krishna sent me everything, men and money. Similarly, if a sincere soul goes out and opens a center in any part of the world, Krishna will help him in all respects. Without being empowered by Krishna, nobody can preach Krishna consciousness. It is not academic qualification or financial strength which helps in these matters, but it is sincerity of purpose which helps us always. Therefore, I wish that you, Brahmananda, will remain in charge of New York. Let Saswarup be in charge of Boston. Let Mukunda be in charge of San Francisco. Let Janardhan be in charge of Montreal. Let Nandarani and Dayananda be in charge of Los Angeles. And let Subal Das be in charge of Santa Fe. In this way, you will follow my example, as I did in the beginning at 26 Second Avenue. That is preaching, cooking, writing, talking, chanting, everything one man's work. I never thought about the audience. I was prepared to chant if there were no man to hear me. The principle of chanting is to glorify the Lord, not to attract a crowd. If Krishna hears nicely, then he will ask some sincere devotee to gather in such a place. Therefore, be advised that thousands of centers may be started if we find out a sincere soul for each and every center. We do not require more men to start. If there is one sincere soul, that is sufficient to start a new center. On November 12th, Srila Prabhupada wrote to Krishna Devi, I'm coming to San Francisco. I shall let you know the exact date sometime next week. I'm coming over very soon to see you when everything will be adjusted. Hope you are well. And the health notes from Achyutananda continue to arrive. Please tell the devotees out there to take good care of him. It is a very hard task trying to restrain him from overworking himself, but they must be strict. He still has to take his medicines and get his massage every day. On November 20th, Prabhupada dispatched by boat to New York more than 800 copies of the first 3 volumes of his Srimad Bhagavatam. And on the next day, his P form finally cleared. Immediately, he booked passage on Pan American Airlines and sent a cable informing Mukunda that he would arrive in San Francisco November 24th at 12:45 p.m. Again, his departure was delayed, this time by a strike by the Communist Party in Calcutta. Businesses closed, cars, buses, rickshaws, and trains stopped running. Riots broke out. There were murders, assassinations. Meanwhile, Prabhupada remained at the Radha Govinda temple. My return to your country is already settled, but due to a petty revolution in Calcutta, I am not able to leave. Our San Francisco friends may be very anxious because I sent them 2 telegrams, one informing them of my arrival and the other canceling it. Future arrangements are pending. 2 weeks passed. While waiting in his room for the political strike to end, Prabhupada received a letter from Umapati, one of the devotees he had initiated at the first initiation in New York in September of '66. Umapati had given up practicing Krishna consciousness for half a year, but now he wrote to say he was back. Prabhupada replied, it is my duty to deliver you the right thing in right earnestness, and it is the duty of the receiver to act in the standard spiritual regulation. When you left us, I simply prayed to Krishna for your return to Krishna consciousness because that was my duty. Any good soul who approaches me once for spiritual enlightenment is supposed to be depending on my responsibility to get him back to Krishna, back home. The disciple may misunderstand a bona fide spiritual master being obliged to do so under the pressure of Maya's influence, but a bona fide spiritual master never lets go of a devotee once accepted. When a disciple understands a bona fide spiritual master, the master regrets his inability to protect the disciple, and sometimes he cries with tears in the eyes. We had an experience while my Guru Maharaj was alive. One of his disciples who accepted sannyas was one day forcibly dragged away by his wife. My Guru Maharaj lamented with tears in his eyes, saying that he could not save the soul. We should always therefore be careful of being attacked by Maya's influence, and the only means of guarantee is to chant Hare Krishna offenselessly. When Prabhupada received the news of quarreling in the Los Angeles temple, he replied to Nandarani, I know that my presence is very urgently required. Arrangement is already completed, and circumstances alone have checked my departure. Please, therefore, don't be worried. I'm coming to your place within a fortnight. At the end of the first week of December, strike ended, and Srila Prabhupada again booked passage. You will be pleased to know that I have purchased my ticket for New York via Tokyo and San Francisco. I'm starting tomorrow morning at 9:30. By evening, reaching Tokyo via Bangkok and Hong Kong, I shall rest 24 hours in Tokyo, and on the 14th at night, I'm starting for San Francisco. By local time, I'm reaching San Francisco on the same day, the 14th, at 12:45 p.m. by Pan American Airlines number 846. Yesterday, I have sent one telegram to this effect, and I hope I shall reach there safely as scheduled. I am so glad to learn that Satyabrat and yourself are trying to get the teachings of Lord Chaitanya published. You do not know how pleased I am to hear this. When one book is published, I think I have conquered an empire. So try to publish as many books as possible, and that will enhance the beauty and prestige of our society. The impersonalist mission has nothing to say substantial, but because they have money and have published so many rubbish literatures, they have become very cheaply popular. You can just imagine how much powerful our society will become when we have as many substantial literatures published. We should not only publish in English, but also in other important languages, such as French and German. When the day for Prabhupada's departure finally arrived, he gave last instructions to Achyutananda and Ramanuja. Just pray to Lord Chaitanya that I can go to America, he requested Achyutananda. How can I? Achyutananda replied. You'll be leaving me. No, Srila Prabhupada replied. We'll always remain packed up together if you remember my teachings. If you preach, you will become strong, and all these teachings will be in proper perspective. When we stop our preaching, then everything becomes stagnated. We lose our life. Even here in India, people think that they know everything, but they are wrong. There is no end to hearing about Krishna. God is unlimited, so no one can say, I know everything about God. Those who say they know everything about God do not know. So everyone will appreciate. Do not fear. Achyutananda. When I returned to the room after sending off Swamiji and paying my obeisances at the airport, I felt a void. I felt very lonely and rather weak. I returned to the room in front of Sri Sri Radha Govinda. And chanting on my beans, I started pacing back and forth. What will I preach? The black and white marble floor passed under me. I stepped on the cracks in between the cracks and on the black and white marble again and again. Then I realized I wasn't seeing Radha Krishna. So I sat down directly in front and saw the brilliant form of Radha Govindaji, and my eyes filled with tears. Srila Prabhupada spent his stopover in Tokyo mostly in going to his hotel and checking into a room, bathing, resting, eating, and returning to the airport the next day in time for his flight to San Francisco. But he did speak with the government secretary, explaining that Krishna consciousness was a universal philosophy for reviving a person's original eternal consciousness. And he explained the crucial need for Krishna consciousness in human society. The secretary, however, said he felt certain that the Japanese government wouldn't be able to help a religious movement. Prabhupada was annoyed. The supposedly educated man was so ignorant as to mistake Krishna consciousness for merely another sectarian religion. Prabhupada wanted intelligent men to try to understand Krishna consciousness and understand that the Gita was actual knowledge, transcendental knowledge, beyond the inferior knowledge of the senses and the mind. But he had his plane to catch. Japan would have to wait. The passengers and flight crew saw Prabhupada as an elderly Indian man dressed in saffron robes. The stewardesses weren't sure at first whether he spoke English, but when he asked them for fruits, they saw that he could and that he was a kind gentleman. He was quiet, putting on his glasses and reading from an old book of Indian scriptures for hours at a time, or moving his lips in prayer while fingering Indian prayer beads in a cloth pouch, or sometimes resting beneath a blanket, his eyes shut. No one knew or bothered to inquire into what he was doing. They didn't know that anxious young hearts were awaiting him in San Francisco, or that the Macmillan Company in New York wanted to publish his English translation of Bhagavad Gita, or that he had spiritual centers in 2 countries with plans for expansion all over the world. Prabhupada sat patiently, chanting often, his hand in his bead bag, depending on Krishna as the hours passed. After a 10-hour flight, the plane landed in San Francisco. Standing with hundreds of other passengers, Prabhupada gradually made his way to the exit, down the long attached tunnel. Even before he reached the terminal building, he could see Govindadasi and a few other disciples smiling and waving from the other side of a glass partition. As he entered the terminal building, he moved toward the glass, and his disciples dropped to their knees, offering obeisances. As they raised their heads, he smiled and continued walking down the corridor while they walked alongside only the glass partition separating them. Then they disappeared from his view as he walked down the stairway towards immigration and customs. The downstairs area was also glassed in, and Prabhupada could see more than 50 devotees and friends waiting eagerly. As they again caught sight of him, they cried out as a group, "Hare Krishna!" Swamiji looked wonderful to them. Tanned from his 6 months in India, younger and more sprightly, he smiled and triumphantly held up his hands in greeting. Devotees were crying in happiness. As Prabhupada stood in line at the customs inspection point, you could hear the devotees' kirtan, the glass walls only partially masking the sound. The customs official had ignored the chanting, although the connection between the saffron robe passenger and the joyful chanters was not hard to see. Srila Prabhupada waited in line, glancing now and then at his chanting disciples. Since he had already sent ahead the 800 books and several crates of musical instruments, he had only one suitcase to place on the table before the inspector. Methodically, the inspector went through the contents: cotton saris for the girls, silk garlands for the Jagannath deities, kartals, saffron dhotis and kurtas, a coconut grater, and little bottles of Ayurvedic medicine. "What are these?" the inspector probed. The little bottles looked strange, and he called in another inspector. A delay. Swamiji's disciples became perturbed by the petty-minded customs inspectors poking through Swamiji's things, now opening the tightly corked bottles, sniffing and checking the contents. The inspector seemed satisfied. Prabhupada tried to close his suitcase, but he couldn't work the zipper. Another delay. The devotees, still anxiously chanting, watched as Swamiji, with the help of the gentleman behind him, managed to zip his suitcase closed. Swamiji walked toward the glass doors. The devotees began chanting madly. As he stepped through the door, a devotee blew a conch shell that resounded loudly throughout the hall. The devotees garlanded him. Everyone pressed in, handing him flowers. He entered their midst as a beloved father enters and reciprocates the embrace of his loving children. Chapter 29, Unlimited Opportunity, Limited Time. Montreal, August 1968. Srila Prabhupada was in his room, speaking with several disciples. "So, Annapurna, you have got some news?" he asked. Annapurna was a young British girl. A few months ago, her father had written from England that he might be able to provide a house if some devotees came there. "Yes," she replied. "So what is our next program?" She was reticent. "That letter from your father is encouraging." "Yes, he encourages me, but he can't provide any place if we come there." Prabhupada looked disappointed. "Well, that's all right. It's up to Krishna. When we go to someone to preach, we have to stand before them with folded hands, with all humility. 'My dear sir, please take to Krishna consciousness.'" "Prabhupada," Pradumna spoke up, "I was reading a book by this big atheist Swami." "There are some letters in the back of the book. I was looking at them." "Atheist Swami's book," Prabhupada said. "We have nothing to do with it." "I wasn't looking at his philosophy," Pradumna explained. "I was just looking at the techniques he used when he was in America. He wanted to go to Europe, so he had a rich benefactor, who went on a 6-week tour of France, England, Germany, Switzerland, Holland, and then back, arranging lectures. That's how he did most of his tour. He had 1 or 2 influential people, and they arranged everything, and the lectures were arranged, and the society. So you can arrange like that?" Prabhupada asked. "I was thinking that there would be a Royal Asiatic Society in London. I think Thakur Bhaktivinoda was a member of that." "But where is Thakur Bhaktivinoda Sangha Association?" Prabhupada asked. "Well," Pradumna continued, "still there may be some people you could open correspondence with. They may be interested in sponsoring you." "Is there anything about Krishna in that Swami's speech?" Prabhupada asked. "No." Prabhupada sat thoughtfully. In England, he would have no place to stay. Pradumna might talk of influential persons traveling ahead and making all arrangements, But where were such persons? Here was a shy girl who could barely even speak up, whose father would not help, and Pradumna reading an atheist Swami talking about Royal Asiatic Society, but nothing practical. Prabhupada had plans, though. He had asked Mukunda and Samasundar to go to London and try to establish an ISKCON center. They had agreed and would be arriving in Montreal from San Francisco in a few days. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Prabhupada's own spiritual master, had wanted Krishna consciousness in Europe. During the 1930s, he had sent his most experienced sannyasis to London, but they had returned, nothing accomplished. It wasn't possible to teach Krishna consciousness to Malechas, they had complained. Europeans couldn't sit long enough to hear the Vaishnava philosophy. One of the sannyasis had met Lord Zeppelin, who had inquired curiously, Swamiji, can you make me a Brahmin? Thirdly, if Zetlin would give up meat eating, intoxication, gambling, and elixir. Impossible, Lord Zetlin had replied. And the sannyasis had accepted this response as the standard for all Europeans. The sannyasis had returned to India. Vaishnavism could never take hold in the West. Prabhupada had faith that his disciples would succeed, that they would help him establish ISKCON centers in Europe, just as they had in North America. Certainly, such success would greatly please Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Prabhupada told of a man who found a gourd lying on the road and picked it up, and then found a stick and a wire, picked them up. In themselves, the three parts were useless, but by putting the gourd, the stick, and the wire together, the man made a veena and began to play beautiful music. Similarly, Prabhupada had come to the West and found some rejected youths lying here and there. And he himself had been rejected by the people of New York City. But by Krishna's grace, the combination had become successful. If his disciples remained sincere and followed his orders, they would succeed in Europe. Three married couples, Mukunda Janaki, Shamasundar, and Malati, with their infant daughter Saraswati, and Guru Das and Yamuna, arrived in Montreal, eager to travel to London. These three couples had begun the temple in San Francisco, where they had close association with Srila Prabhupada. They had helped Prabhupada introduce Kirtan, Prasadam, and Rath Yatra among the hippies of Haight-Ashbury. Now they were eager to help him introduce Krishna consciousness in London. Prabhupada asked the three couples to remain with him in Montreal for a week or two, so that he could train them to perform Kirtan expertly. Chanting Hare Krishna was not a theatrical performance, but an act of devotion, properly conducted only by pure devotees, not by professional musicians. Yet if Prabhupada's disciples became proficient in their singing, Londoners would better appreciate Krishna consciousness. The thought of these devotees preaching in England made Prabhupada ecstatic. With their gymnastics and impersonal meditation. As the London program became a tangible fact, Prabhupada began to reveal more plans. Prabhupada already seemed to have hundreds of detailed plans for implementing Krishna consciousness around the world. He only needed willing helpers. In the daily kirtan rehearsals, Prabhupada taught the devotees to chant Hare Krishna and other devotional songs, beginning with a slow tempo and building gradually. He would regularly interrupt and have them begin again. Listening carefully as Yamuna led the chanting, Prabhupada would stop her at times to correct her Sanskrit pronunciation. After 2 weeks in Montreal, the London party came together for a final meeting with Prabhupada. He was sending them to start a center in London to fulfill his spiritual master's dream. The sannyasis Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had sent to London, Prabhupada told them, had lectured in a few places, posed for photos with lords and ladies, and then returned to India. But Prabhupada wanted his disciples to go out boldly, chant the holy name, and attract others to chant. Lord Chaitanya had personally used this method while touring South India. Chaitanya Charitamrita describes that whoever saw Lord Chaitanya became ecstatic in love of God. Then the ecstatic person would chant the holy name and ask others to chant. And when they saw that person, they too would become ecstatic. Thus, the waves of ecstatic love of Krishna would increase. Prabhupada predicted that when the devotees chanted Hare Krishna, the people of London would hear the mantra, become devotees, and then enlighten others. Krishna consciousness would grow. The only requirement was that the chanting be done purely, without any material motivation. Prabhupada's enthusiasm was contagious, and as he spoke, he filled his disciples with the same contagious enthusiasm. When Mukunda asked Prabhupada if he had any specific instructions, Prabhupada replied with a story. In his youth, he had once seen a movie of Charlie Chaplin. The setting was a formal ball held outdoors, and off from the main dance arena were lanes with benches where couples sat. Some mischievous boys had plastered glue on one of the benches, and a young man and his girlfriend came and sat down. When the young man got up, Prabhupada laughed as he told the story. His tails tore up the middle. Prabhupada told how the couple had returned to the dance unaware of what had happened, but now they drew stares from the other dancers, wondering why he was suddenly attracting so much attention. The man went into the dressing room and saw in the mirror his ripped coattails. Deliberately, he then tore his coat all the way up to the collar, returned to his partner, and began dancing exuberantly. Then another man joined, ripping his own coattails and dancing with his partner as if to compete with the first couple. One by one, the other dancers followed, ripping their coattails and dancing with abandon. By the conclusion of the story, the devotees in Prabhupada's room were all laughing uproariously. But finally, their laughter subsided and the meeting ended. Not until the devotees were already at the airport did Mukunda, talking with Samasundar, begin to appreciate and marvel how expertly Prabhupada had answered his question. By their bold, enthusiastic, confident preaching, they would attract people. Not everyone would immediately join in the dancing, as had the people in the Charlie Chaplin film. The devotees might even be considered crazy at first, but they would be offering Krishna consciousness, the highest and rarest gift. And intelligent people would gradually appreciate this, even if at first they scoffed. By Srila Prabhupada's order, his London-bound disciples holding kirtan in public would present a profile quite different from the reserved profile of his sannyasi godbrothers. His godbrothers had imitated the British ways, but Prabhupada wanted the British to imitate the Vaishnavas. To appear in the streets of London with shaven heads and dhotis would require boldness, but it would be exciting to chant, carrying out the order of Lord Chaitanya, and the people would follow gradually but definitely. It was the will of Lord Chaitanya. Srila Prabhupada's visit to Montreal took place early in the summer of '68, 6 months after his return to America. In India, from July to December of '67, he had recovered his health, and on December 14th, he had returned to San Francisco. After a few weeks, he had gone to Los Angeles, where a small group of disciples had opened a storefront temple in a middle-class Black and Hispanic neighborhood. The storefront was bare, and the location was secluded. Prabhupada had stayed there 2 months, delivering lectures, holding kirtans, and giving strength and inspiration to his disciples. Although a buzzing in his head made work difficult, he had found the warm climate and sunshine agreeable and continued to translate Srimad Bhagavatam, dictating tapes and sending them to Boston for typing. A reporter from Life had come to Srila Prabhupada's apartment and interviewed him for an upcoming Life feature, Year of the Guru. When the story had appeared, it had mixed Srila Prabhupada and his movement with coverage of other gurus. Although the article had carried a large color photo of Srila Prabhupada and favorably described a reporter's visit to the New York ISKCON Center, Prabhupada had said that being grouped with gurus who taught concoctions of yoga and meditation was not good. In May, a few months after leaving Los Angeles, Prabhupada had paid a first visit to his ISKCON Center in Boston. There also, he had found a few disciples based in a small storefront. He had lectured at many of the local universities, including Harvard and MIT. At MIT, addressing a gathering of students and faculty, he had challenged, where is this university? Where is there in this university department to teach scientifically the difference between a living body and a dead body? The most fundamental science, the science of the living soul, was not being taught. After Boston, Srila Prabhupada had come to Montreal, and after 3 months in Montreal, Prabhupada flew to Seattle, where he stayed for 1 month. Then he briefly visited Santa Fe, New Mexico, where the ISKCON Center was a tiny, isolated storefront. Prabhupada's reason for traveling from center to center were to train and convince each disciple to speak with newcomers. Many young people came to hear, but Prabhupada found the majority already ruined by illicit sex and drugs. They were rich men's sons, but they had become hippies, wandering the streets. By Krishna's grace, now some of them were being saved. Even while recuperating in India, Prabhupada had always thought of returning to America to continue his movement. The Indians had seemed interested only in sense gratification, like that of the Americans. But many American youths, disillusioned with their father's wealth, were not going to the skyscrapers or to their father's businesses. As Prabhupada had seen from his stay in New York City and San Francisco, thousands of youths were seeking an alternative to materialism. Frustrated, they were ripe for spiritual knowledge. Devotees, still neophytes, knew nothing of spiritual life, and in most cases, very little of material life. But because they were sincerely taking to Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada was confident that their shortcomings would not prevent their spiritual progress. Although naturally beautiful, these Western youths were now dirty and morose. Their beauty had become covered, but the chanting of Hare Krishna was reviving them. Prabhupada said, just as the monsoon revives the land of Vrindavan, making it fresh and verdant, and as the Vrindavan peacocks sometimes dance jubilantly, so the devotees, having shed their material bonds, were now ecstatically dancing and chanting the holy names. When a reporter asked Prabhupada if his disciples were hippies, Prabhupada replied, no, we are not hippies, we are happies. More than being a visiting lecturer or formal guide, Srila Prabhupada was the spiritual father of his disciples. They accepted him as their real father, and he found them devoted and affectionate, far more than his own family had been. These young American boys and girls, the flower of your country, Prabhupada called them, had received the blessings of Lord Chaitanya and were delivering that blessing to their countrymen. Prabhupada said it was up to his American disciples to save their country. He was giving them the method, but they would have to implement it. Srila Prabhupada loved his disciples and they loved him. Out of love, he was giving them the greatest treasure, and out of love, they were following his instructions. This was the essence of spiritual life. On the basis of this love, the Krishna consciousness movement would grow. Not surprisingly, some disciples had fallen away to their former materialistic ways of living. But Prabhupada sought those sincere souls who would stay. That was the important thing he said. One moon is more valuable than many stars. So even a few sincere workers would accomplish wonderful things. The sincere and intelligent would stay, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would empower them to carry out his desires for distributing love of Krishna. In this way, the devotees' lives would become perfect. Many disciples, in fact, already felt this happening. Krishna consciousness worked because they sincerely practiced it and because Srila Prabhupada carefully and patiently tended the growing plants of transcendental loving service he had planted in their hearts. Los Angeles, October 1968. Srila Prabhupada returned to find the devotees living and worshiping in an exciting location on Hollywood Boulevard. A large Sankirtan party organized by his disciple Tamal Krishna would chant Hare Krishna on the streets all day and sell Back to Godhead magazines in larger quantities than ever before, as many as 200 magazines a day, with a collection of over $100. Then one day, shortly after Prabhupada's arrival, the landlord evicted the devotees from their place on Hollywood Boulevard. With no temple, the devotee moved to scattered locations throughout the city. As many evenings as possible, however, they would all gather in someone's garage, lent to them for the evening, and Srila Prabhupada would chant Hare Krishna with them and lecture. Then Prabhupada rented a former Christian church on La Cienega Boulevard. He introduced a more regulated deity worship and an increased Sunday love feast. Each week would bring new specially planned festival with a big feast and hundreds of guests. These new programs in Los Angeles encouraged Prabhupada, and he wanted to see them introduced in ISKCON centers throughout the world. Srila Prabhupada was planning to go to England, but first he wanted to visit his farm project in West Virginia. And he had also been promising the devotees in San Francisco he would attend their Rath Yatra festival in July. This traveling to establish and expand his ISKCON was alone enough to keep him busy, yet he was also always meditating on his work of translating and commenting on Vedic literature. In LA during December, Srila Prabhupada had begun The Nectar of Devotion, a summary study of Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. The Nectar of Devotion would be a handbook for his disciples, elaborately explaining the science and practice of Bhakti Yoga. Simultaneous with the Nectar Devotion, he had also begun Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, a summary study of Srimad Bhagavatam's 10th canto. Visiting the temple only on Sundays, he had spent most of his time at his small rented house on the outskirts of Beverly Hills, where he worked intensely on his two major literary projects. Prabhupada's most ambitious literary undertaking, the completion of Srimad Bhagavatam, was to be no less than 60 volumes. He had begun in India in 1959, and all along he had been aware that he was attempting a gigantic task at an advanced age. Now Krishna was giving him opportunities both for writing Vedic literatures and for traveling, and he was working at an amazing pace. The force driving Prabhupada was the desire of his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. As for how much time he had remaining to execute his mission, that was in Krishna's hands. Everything was up to Krishna. If Krishna wants to kill you, no one can save you, and if Krishna wants to save you, no one can kill you. Yet, although Prabhupada was always in transcendental consciousness, beyond the effects of old age, he was aware that he didn't have many more years left. All along, he had a vision of a spiritual movement for all nations and cultures, and to establish that, he was racing against time. Srila Prabhupada's mood of urgency was the natural mood of the Vaishnava preacher, an ambition to engage everyone in loving service to Krishna. Without Krishna consciousness, the bewildered conditioned souls of Kali Yuga were all heading for the horrible consequences of their sinful lives. Prabhupada's sense of urgency, therefore, was an expression of his compassion. He wanted to save the gross materialists who were blind to the existence of the soul. If they wasted their human life, they would suffer millions of years before getting another chance to awaken their Krishna consciousness and go back to Godhead. The heart attack Prabhupada had endured in 1967 had accelerated his mood of urgency. Although before the heart attack, he had often worked like a young man and played the drum for hours, now Krishna's warning was clear. The heart attack was to have been the time of his death. Prabhupada had said, but because his disciples had prayed, our master has not finished his work, please protect him. Krishna had spared him. Similarly, on the boat to America in 1965, his heart had almost failed, but then also Krishna had saved his life. The scope of Prabhupada's work was enormous. Even with many years and good health, he could never finish. Prabhupada saw that in future generations, many people would come forward to help. Thus, by a combined effort, the Krishna consciousness movement would continue to check the forces of Kali Yuga and save the entire world. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had predicted this, and Prabhupada knew that it must come to pass. But the task of erecting the framework for this universal effort rested on Prabhupada alone, and he worked tirelessly, knowing that unless he established a complete foundation, the entire mission might later collapse. Beginning with Prabhupada's first success in New York City in '66, Krishna has shown unlimited opportunities for spreading Krishna consciousness. But how much time was there? Only Krishna could say. It was up to him. Prabhupada remained ever mindful of the vast scope of his mission and the ever narrowing span of time he had in which to complete it. I am an old man, he often told his disciples. I could pass away at any moment. Srila Prabhupada would receive several letters a week from the devotees in London. It was now December of 1968. The devotees had been in London 4 months, and still they had no temple, nor even a place where they could live and worship together. Mostly they had been visiting Hindu families, holding kirtan, and sharing prasadam. Srila Prabhupada had encouraged this, but after hearing a few reports, he decided the program was stagnant. The devotees should not expect much from the Hindus, he said. They have become hodgepodge due to so many years of subjugation by foreigners and have lost their own culture. I am concerned to preach this gospel amongst the Europeans and Americans. The devotees were jolted, but they knew Prabhupada was right. Determined to change their tactics, they immediately began lecturing at colleges and universities and chanting in the streets. They were preaching to the British, and it felt right when they wrote to Prabhupada that although they had accomplished little, they were planting seeds. Prabhupada replied, regarding your analogy of sowing Krishna conscious seeds, I may inform you there is a Bengali proverb, Sabure meoya pale. This means that fruits like chestnuts and pomegranates or similar other valuable fruits and nuts take some time to be fructified. So any good thing comes into our possession after hard struggle and endeavor. So Krishna consciousness is the greatest of all good fruits. We must therefore have necessary endurance and enthusiasm to get the result. We shall never be disappointed when things are presented in reversed order. Anyway, your honest labor is now coming to be fructified. Always depend on Krishna and go on working with enthusiasm, patience, and conviction. Through the spring and summer of 1969, Prabhupada continued touring his American ISKCON centers. From Los Angeles, he had sent Gurasundar and Govindadasi, a young married couple, to Hawaii. And on their invitation that he come during the mango season, he joined them. But when he got there in March, he found that it was not mango season and that his disciples had accomplished little. They had taken jobs to support themselves. New York City, the birthplace of his Krishna Consciousness Society, where his movement had been growing for nearly 3 years. Although the center was established and his books were being distributed, he still had to visit to strengthen the devotees. His presence gave them determination and courage. For 7 months, they had carried on without his personal touch. But his visits, when he would sit in his room and reciprocate warmly with them, were vital. Nothing could equal these intimate meetings. Many devotees, new and old, crowded into Prabhupada's apartment at 26 2nd Avenue. There was one reporter for the Honolulu Advertiser, Prabhupada said. He was putting questions to me. And then he wrote an article. The Swami is a small man, but he is delivering a great message. That is true. I am small, but the message, that is not small. Brahmananda showed Prabhupada a globe with markers representing ISKCON centers. Now there is one in North Carolina, Brahmananda said. Then it becomes 15, Prabhupada asked. He was smiling and looking directly from one devotee to another. I want each of you to go and start a center. What is the difficulty? Make one mridanga. Then another person will come and join you. He will take kartals. When I came here, Brahmananda and Achyutananda were dancing. And after chanting, hundreds of men will come to your storefront and enjoy chanting and dancing. The girls also? Rukmini asked. There is no harm, Prabhupada said. Krishna does not make distinction, female dress or male dress. I mean to say the female body is weaker, but spiritually the body does not matter. In the absence of Lord Nityananda, his wife Janamadevi was preaching. First, you must understand the philosophy. You must be prepared to answer questions. Krishna will give you intelligence. Just like I was not prepared to answer all these questions, but Krishna gives intelligence. After 8 days in his New York home, Prabhupada went to Buffalo. At State University of New York at Buffalo, Rupanuga was teaching an accredited course in Krishna Yoga with some 60 students enrolled, regularly chanting the Hare Krishna mantra on beads. Prabhupada stayed for a few days lecturing and initiating disciples. Then he went to Boston for more initiations and several marriages. Columbus, Ohio, May 9, 1969. The devotees had arranged for Prabhupada and Allen Ginsberg to chant on stage at Ohio State University. Allen had been a friend of the Krishna consciousness movement from his first days on the Lower East Side. Shortly after Prabhupada's arrival in Columbus, he stopped by Prabhupada's house and discussed philosophy with Prabhupada for several hours. Allen was friendly with Prabhupada, as always, but he doubted whether Krishna consciousness would become popular in America. The need, he said, is for a large, single, unifying religious movement in America. So here is Krishna, Prabhupada replied, all attractive. Now you can say, why shall I accept Krishna? But since you ask for a unifying element, then I say, here is Krishna. Now you can analyze why you should accept Krishna. And I shall reply, Why you shall not? Whatever you want or expect from the supreme or unifying, everything is there in Krishna. If Prabhupada wanted his movement popularized, Alan suggested he should consider omitting many of the sectarian Hindu aspects, such as the dress, the food, and the Sanskrit. Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada replied, was not sectarian or Hindu. Lord Chaitanya had said that a person could chant any name of God, but one must chant. As for the food, Prabhupada explained that any food was acceptable as long as it was purely vegetarian. And dress, there was no stricture that Americans wear robes and shave their heads. The Hare Krishna mantra, Prabhupada said, was natural sound, not foreign. Alan objected. The Hare Krishna mantra sounded foreign. Perhaps they should think of an alternative, more American mantra. This is going on, Prabhupada replied. Some people are inclined to one thing and some to another's, and it will go on until the end of creation. But our position is that we are searching after the center, and here is the center. At Ohio State Hitchcock Hall, 1,000 students occupied the seats, and 1,000 more crowded the aisles and the stage. The program began with a kirtan led by Allen Ginsberg. Allen then introduced Prabhupada, and Prabhupada lectured. When Prabhupada began the second and final kirtan of the evening, the students responded wildly. Those seated stood and danced, some jumping in their seats, and those in the aisles and on the stage also joined in. Amid the thunderous kirtan of nearly 2,000 voices, Prabhupada began to dance, jumping up and down on the speaker's dais, his hands raised high. He threw flowers from his garland, and the students scrambled for them. Wildly ecstatic kirtan continued for almost an hour, and then Prabhupada brought it to a close. Afterwards, hundreds of students crowded close around Prabhupada, asking him questions. Many students continued to chant as they left the hall, and some left crying from the new sensations of spiritual happiness. The next day, the ecstatic night of chanting at Hitchcock Hall was the talk of the campus. Prabhupada was pleased with the evening, and he described the event in a letter to the devotees in Los Angeles. Yesterday at Ohio State University, we had a tremendous meeting with nearly 2,000 students dancing, clapping, chanting along with us. So it is clear that the student community has nice potential for accepting this philosophy. New Vrindavan, May 21st, 1969. Accompanied by Kirtananda Swami and Hayagriva, Prabhupada then traveled from Columbus to the New Vrindavan farm project in the hills of West Virginia. When their car got stuck in a neighbor's garden near the entrance to the property, Prabhupada decided to walk the final 2 miles along the muddy access road that led to the farm. The road soon ended, however, and Prabhupada and his 2 guides picked up a footpath entering the dense forest. The mid-May trees were still coming into foliage, and the sunlight broke through the branches to a carpet. Brilliant purple flocks. Prabhupada walked quickly ahead of Kirtananda Swami and Hayagriva, who hurried to keep up. A winding creek repeatedly crossed the path, and Prabhupada would cross by stepping from one stone to a stone. The road, he said, would not be difficult to travel by ox cart. The forest was like a jungle, just as he expected and wanted.
For the past year, Prabhupada had corresponded with Kirtananda Swami and Hayagriva concerning New Vrindavan And this correspondence had established the direction for Krishna-conscious country living. Prabhupada had said he wanted a community based on Vedic ideals, everyone living simply, keeping cows and working the land. The devotees would have to develop these ideas gradually. It would take time, but even in the beginning, the keynote should be the simple living and high thinking. Because the community would remain completely aloof from the city, it would at first appear inconvenient and austere, but life would be peaceful, free from the anxiety of the artificial urban society based on hard work for sense gratification. And most important, the members of such community would be serving Krishna and chanting his name. Prabhupada spoke little, making his way along the path as if at his own home. They stopped beside the creek, and Prabhupada sat down on a blanket Kirtananda Swami and Hayagriva spread for him on the grass. "We are stopping for Kirtananda," Prabhupada said. "He is tired." Prabhupada and his party drank water from the creek, rested briefly, and then continued. As they rounded a curve in the road, Prabhupada could see a clearing on the ridge ahead. A small frame house in a barn, and the barn stood at the lower end of the ridge. These two ancient structures, Hayagriva explained, were the only buildings on New Vrindavan's 120 acres. As no vehicles traveled here, the paths were overrun with high grass. A willow spread its branches close by the old house. The settlement was the picture of undisturbed primitive life. Prabhupada liked the simple life at New Vrindavan. Whatever simple thing the devotees offered him, he accepted with satisfaction. They served him freshly ground wheat cereal cooked in milk, and he said it was wonderful. When he saw the kitchen's dirt floor covered with cow dung, he approved, saying it was just like in an Indian village. Prabhupada also liked his room in the attic, directly above the temple room. He brought out a small Radha Krishna deities he had been traveling with for the last month and a half, and had his servant Devananda improvise an altar on a small table to one side of the room, arranging his two trunks as a desk and placing a picture of his spiritual master on one of the trunks. Prabhupada immediately resumed his usual schedule. He would take his late morning massage sitting outside and then bathe with warm water in an improvised outdoor shower stall. Kirtananda Swami prepared Prabhupada's usual lunch of dal, rice, and chapatis, plus some local pork-wheat. The previous summer, Kirtananda Swami and Hayagriva had picked and canned blackberries, which they now served Prabhupada's blackberry chutney. The chapatis were from freshly milled whole wheat, and everything was cooked over a wood fire. The best fuel for cooking, Prabhupada said, was cow dung. Wood was second, gas third, and electricity last. Prabhupada spent much of the day out of doors under a persimmon tree about 100 feet from the house. There, he would sit and read at a low table one of the men had built. Often he would look up from his reading and gaze across the deep valley to the distant ridge where the forest met the sky. In the late afternoon, devotees would gather under the persimmon tree with Prabhupada, sitting and talking with him until after sunset. They saw Prabhupada's living with them as a practical demonstration of New Vrindavan's importance. If he, the greatest devotee, could be satisfied living simply and chanting Hare Krishna in this backwoods setting, then they should follow his example. Comparing New Vrindavan to the Vrindavana in India, Prabhupada said that New Vrindavan was in some ways better since Vrindavana in India was now congested with worldly men. 500 years ago, the Goswami followers of Lord Chaitanya had excavated the sites of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavana, and only pure devotees had lived there. But in recent years, Vrindavana had become a place for materialists and impersonalists. New Vrindavan, however, should admit only the spirituality inclined. In Vedic society, Prabhupada said, everyone had been satisfied to live like this in a small village beside the river. Factories were unnecessary. Prabhupada wanted this Vedic way of life for the entire world, and New Vrindavan could serve as a model for the benefit of the masses. New Vrindavan had no phone, and mail had to be fetched by a 2-mile walk. In this, Prabhupada said New Vrindavan was like Vrindavana, India. Both Vrindavanas lack in modern amenities. This difficulty, in quotes, however, coupled well with Vaishnava philosophy that modern amenities were not worth the trouble required to get them. A devotee accepting whatever nature provides spends his time and energy in spiritual life. New Vrindavan's only cow was black and white, crossbreed named Noon at night. I haven't tasted milk like this in 65 years, he said. One day he predicted New Vrindavan would have many cows and their others would be so full that the dripping milk would muddy the pastures. Although people in the West were blind to the great sin of cow slaughter and its grievous karmic reactions, he said New Vrindavan would demonstrate to the world the social, moral, and economic advantages of protecting the cow and utilizing her milk rather than killing her and eating her flesh. Prabhupada wanted the New Vrindavan devotees to build cottages. He wanted many buildings, even if at first they were primitive. And he gave a plan for a simple structure of baked mud. He also wanted a Krishna conscious school, and the country, he said, would be the best place for it. The city is made by man, and the country is made by God, Prabhupada said, paraphrasing the British poet Cowper. The young students should learn reading, writing, and arithmetics, and at the same time, they should become pure devotees. In their play, they would imitate the pastimes of Krishna and his cowherd boyfriends, with one child massaging Krishna, another wrestling with Krishna, just as in the spiritual world. The women in New Vrindavan, Prabhupada said, should care for the children, clean the temple, cook for the deities, and churn butter. He had many plans for New Vrindavan, and he was giving only idea seeds with few details. You developed it to your heart's content, he told Kirtananda Swami. An ideal Vedic community with the members producing all their own food and necessities was what Prabhupada wanted. Unless the devotees at New Vrindavan could become self-sufficient, he said, there was no use in their occupying such a big piece of land. Even before Prabhupada's visit to New Vrindavan, he had requested Kirtananda Swami and Hayagriva to plan for 7 temples on the property. These 7 temples should be named after the major temples of old Vrindavana: Madana Mohana, Govindaji, Govinata, Radha Damodara, Radha Ramana, Shyama Sundara, and Radha Gokulananda. Prabhupada said he would personally secure Radha Krishna deities for each temple. It was inevitable that Prabhupada leave New Vrindavan. Letters from London, Los Angeles, and San Francisco compelled him to travel. On the day of his departure, the New Vrindavan devotees teased him, saying he couldn't go. Kirtananda Swami went so far as to say they would block his way on the road, but Prabhupada corrected him. You can't do that to the spiritual master. Accompanied by Kirtananda Swami and the New Vrindavan devotees, Prabhupada walked along the forest path. The New Vrindavan countryside was verdant, the summer air hot and moist. Prabhupada was silent. He had come here to encourage his disciples, and he himself had also become encouraged. Here was simple village life, as Krishna himself had lived it, depending on the land and the cow. That cow Kalia had given such a nice milk. New Vrindavan's cows were not ordinary. They knew they would not be killed. So far, only a few devotees were here, but by Krishna's grace, more would come. Prabhupada and Kirtananda Swami walked together along the forest path, saying little, but their mutual understanding was deep. Prabhupada had not given him many specific instructions. A few words while sitting or walking together outdoors, a gesture, a facial expression of pleasure or concern. Kirtananda Swami could understand, however, that New Vrindavan was very dear to his spiritual master and should become dear to him also. Prabhupada assured him that because the devotees of New Vrindavan were centered on chanting Hare Krishna, serving deities and protecting the cows, Krishna would bless them with success. The community was already successful, and Krishna would continue to protect the devotees against all impediments and difficulties. At the end of the 2-mile walk, Prabhupada, surrounded by his followers, stood beside the car that was pieces which had come out on a horse-drawn cart were loaded onto the car's luggage compartment, and Prabhupada got in the back seat. Amid cries of Hare Krishna and Prabhupada, the car pulled out into the country highway, and Prabhupada continued chanting Hare Krishna on his beads. Prabhupada had been hearing regularly from his 6 disciples in London, having little money and living as separate couples in different parts of the city. They found their greatest inspiration in Prabhupada's letters. They would repeatedly read his instructions and dream of when he would one day visit them in London. Also in San Francisco, Krishna consciousness had been found for the 3 couples. In England, it was becoming more and more difficult. The devotees, being foreigners, were not allowed to earn a salary, and except for a few contacts, they knew no one. Although unable to live together, they were trying to maintain their morale and Krishna consciousness. Yamuna. I had to move to a Jamaican ghetto, the top floor of one of the buildings. It was awful. Day after day, I would sit and listen to a tape of Prabhupada singing. It was beautiful tape he had just done in Los Angeles, and I would pray to him, please come, Mukunda. Letters, that's what kept us alive. Prabhupada would write and say, I'm coming. 2 or 3 times he wrote to say, I'm coming by March. And we would write back and say we wanted to get the place first. We really felt it wouldn't be right for him to come unless he had a place first. He wrote a letter to my wife. I was planning to come by March, but your husband is not allowing me. What can I do? The devotees in London had not seen Prabhupada in 4 months, and still there was no date set for his visit. Although they sometimes became discouraged and talked of going back to America, they persevered. Prabhupada had promised he would come when they got a temple, and that promise helped them remember that they were personally serving him. They felt that he was doing the work and they were his assistants. His absence was only external. By his instructions, whether written, spoken, or remembered in their heart, he was always with them. He was constantly directing them. While trying out various schemes to popularize Krishna consciousness in London, Shyamasundar arranged for a program to which he invited many of London's prominent citizens. About 100 people responded to Shyamasundar's formal invitation. 1 member of parliament, a few government officials, but mostly young people. The devotees served a feast and showed a film of Srila Prabhupada walking by Stove Lake in Golden Gate Park. Prabhupada had sent a tape recording specifically for the evening, and the devotees highlighted it as an evening special attraction, even though they had not had time to hear it in advance. Gurudasa started the tape, and suddenly there was Prabhupada's voice. Ladies and gentlemen, please accept my greetings and be happy year of 1969 and blessings of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for your kindly participating in this happy meeting of Krishna consciousness. Although Prabhupada had recorded the tape in the quiet of his room in Los Angeles, devotees were astonished to feel Prabhupada's direct presence, preaching Krishna consciousness to the English. Lord Chaitanya informed us that the absolute Supreme Personality of Godhead can descend in transcendental sound vibration, and thus when we chant Hare Krishna mantra offenselessly, we immediately contact Krishna and his internal energy. Thus we become immediately purified from all dirty things in our heart. The guests sat listening politely as Prabhupada described the soul's travail of transmigrating from body to body and the path of the soul's liberation through chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna consciousness was transcendently colorful and full of transcendental pleasure. Chanting should be done anywhere, on the street, in the park, at home. Prabhupada concluded his talk. But to assemble and sit together, we require a place for congregation. Therefore, a temple of the Krishna consciousness movement is required to be established in various centers of the world, irrespective of their particular country's culture, philosophy, and religion. Krishna consciousness is so universal and perfect that it can appeal to anyone, everyone, irrespective of his position. Therefore, I fervently appeal to you all present in this meeting to extend your cooperation for successful execution of this great movement. Thank you once more. There was a pause, and then Prabhupada began playing the harmonium and singing Hare Krishna. Afterward, he again spoke. My disciples in London have very eagerly asked me to visit there, and I'm also very anxious to see you all. So as soon as there is opportunity, I shall go with any Sankirtana, with my Sankirtana party, who are now engaged in Los Angeles. And that will be great pleasure for you all to meet together. That is all. Only a few weeks after this meeting, the group received their first important publicity. A photo of the 6 devotees and the little Saraswati appeared with an article by the famous columnist Atticus in the Sunday Times. Gurudasa was quoted as saying, Hare Krishna is a chant which sets God dancing on your tongue. Try chanting Queen Elizabeth and see the difference. The article described the missionary group from America as very gentle people, a bit unworldly, but not at all ingenious. Citing their renunciation of illicit sex and intoxication, the article commented, tame you might think, but they look very well on it. And that's what's likely to earn them a public is their chanting. Within a few days, the same article appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle, but with a new headline, Krishna chants startle London. Prabhupada was pleased when he saw the headline. Indeed, his Grahasta disciples had succeeded where his sannyasi godbrothers had failed. Although several of Prabhupada's scholarly godbrothers had lectured around England over the last 35 years, only one person, an elderly English lady named Elizabeth Bowtell, had shown interest. Yamuna had written Prabhupada to find out if they should visit Mrs. Bowtell. She had received the name Vinoda Vanidasi, and Prabhupada had replied, the history of this Vanidasi is that she is an old lady and has a house and has hung a sign, Gaudiya Math, but that is all. If they liked, Prabhupada had said they could pay her a courtesy call and see if she would let them use her place for kirtanas. One of the men had gone to see her at her home several hours out of the city, but from behind the closed door, she had refused to meet with him unless he brought an introductory letter from the Gaudiya Math in New Delhi. Vinoda Mani Dasi was the fruit of 35 years of sannyasis preaching in England, whereas in 4 months, Prabhupada's young American missionaries were startling London. After months of living scattered throughout the city, the devotees met a landlord who allowed them to stay together rent-free in a vacant warehouse at Covent Garden. The devotees improvised a temporary temple and soon recruited their first 3 British devotees. The newcomers at once took to the full Krishna conscious regimen, including the dhoti and shaved head, and loved it. The devotees, thrilled to see their group expanding and Prabhupada's potency working, decided to phone Prabhupada from their landlord's office. The telephone was a conference phone, and Prabhupada's voice came over at the little loudspeaker on the desk. The devotees sat around the desk, listening tensely. Prabhupada, Mukunda said, we have some new brahmacharis here. Oh, are they cooking chapatis? Prabhupada asked from across the ocean. The devotees laughed uncontrollably, then hushed to hear more. No, said Mukunda, but they will be now. The devotees each told Prabhupada how they miss him, and he said he missed them too and would come as soon as they could get a place. After allowing the devotees 3 months in the warehouse at Covent Garden, the landlord announced that he needed to use the space and devotees would have to move. The couples moved to 3 separate locations, and again the strong group spirit dissipated. Prabhupada began sending 2 or 3 letters a week to the scattered couples, praising them for their sincere determination. The devotees would gather regularly, if only to show one another their latest letters. Prabhupada wrote to Mukunda of his desire to preach Krishna consciousness in the West, specifically London. So far as I'm concerned, I always wish only to expedite my mission of life to spread Krishna consciousness in the Western part of the world. I'm still firmly convinced that if I can establish this movement through the help of all you boys and girls who have now joined with me, then it will be great achievement. I'm an old man, and there has already been warning, but there, before I leave this body, I wish to see some of you very strong in Krishna consciousness understanding. I'm very glad and proud also that you 6 boys and girls, although you have not been able to establish a nice center in London, still you have done your best. And the news that has reached far away in India that my disciples are doing very nice work in Krishna consciousness. So that is my pride. I have received a letter from my god brother informing me that it has been advertised in India that in Vietnam also somebody is spreading Hare Krishna movement. So there is no need to be disappointed. You go on with your work as best as Krishna gives you the opportunity. And there is no cause of your anxiety. Everything is going smoothly. But since you are now separated, the strength of your activities appears to be a little disturbed. Now you try to assemble together in the same spirit as you were doing, and in that case, temple or no temple, your movement will go on progressively. We are not much concerned about the temple because temple worship is not primary factor in this age. Primary factor is Sankirtan, but sometimes we want to a center where people may gather and see. So a temple is required secondarily. So try your best immediately to live together. I'm very much here to see that you are again living together. For Srila Prabhupada's disciples, his instructions that they preach in London was much more binding than any other obligation. He was in their hearts, and they thought of him constantly. In carrying out his orders and trying to please him, they were constrained by not by force or law, but by love. To please the spiritual master is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As for Prabhupada's sincere disciples, to please him seemed the end of it in itself. Los Angeles, June 23, 1969. After leaving New Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada visited his center in Los Angeles, where he installed deities of Radha and Krishna. Although, as he had told his disciples in London, the primary factor was Sankirtana, deity worship was also necessary. In his writings, Prabhupada had discussed the need for deity worships, and he had gradually introduced higher and higher standards of deity worship in each of his ISKCON centers. Los Angeles, having become the model ISKCON center, was a natural place for him to introduce a more opulent and demanding standard for worshiping Radha and Krishna. While more than 100 devotees and guests sat in the spacious hall, Prabhupada bathed and dressed the little forms of Radha and Krishna, then placed them on the altar. He was inviting Radha and Krishna to descend to give his disciples the opportunity to serve them. He was offering his disciples Radha and Krishna with faith that his disciples would not neglect them. If the devotees somehow lost their enthusiasm, Prabhupada explained in his lecture, then the worship would become like idol worship. If there is no life, then it is idol worship. Where there is life, feeling, then you think, where is Krishna? Here is Krishna. Oh, I have to serve him. I have to dress him. I have to serve Radharani. She's here. Oh, I just have to do it very nicely and as far as possible. Decorate her to the best capacity. If you think like this, then you are Krishna conscious. But you think that it is brass-made doll or idol, then Krishna will reciprocate with you accordingly. If you think that this is a brass-made idol, then it will remain brass-made idol to you forever. But if you elevate yourself to a higher platform of Krishna consciousness, then Krishna, this very Krishna, will talk with you. This Krishna will talk with you. With each visit of each center, Prabhupada gave the devotees more service, depending on their commitment to Krishna. All the various services were actually the spiritual master's responsibility, he said, and when a disciple cleaned the temple or performed any service, he did so as the spiritual master's assistant. And any job done improperly was the spiritual master's anxiety. If the devotees whimsically changed the deity worship or neglected the temple, then Prabhupada, more than any disciple, would feel distress. Whenever Prabhupada saw a disciple is eager to take on more of anxiety of preaching Krishna consciousness, he would assign that devotee greater opportunity. Anxiety for serving Krishna, Prabhupada said, was the greatest satisfaction. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur had stated, the trouble I encounter in your devotional service, I will consider the greatest happiness. Satisfaction for the devotee, Prabhupada explained, lay in pleasing the previous spiritual masters, and that was best accomplished by preaching to the fallen souls. To the degree that the devotees carried out that order, they would satisfy their spiritual master and subsequently feel satisfaction themselves. Prabhupada gave the example of Krishna and the gopis. When the gopis pleased Krishna in the rasa dance, Krishna smiled, and when the gopis saw Krishna smile, their happiness and beauty increased 1,000,000 times. When Krishna saw the newly increased beauty of the gopis, he became more pleased, and thus the happiness and beauty of the gopis increased even more. This loving competition increased on and on unlimitedly. Even in dealings between spiritual master and disciple, a sense of loving competition prevailed, each wanting to serve the other, neither seeking service for himself. Prabhupada was increasing the duties and responsibilities in each of his ISKCON centers, and sincere disciples were coming forward to accept those responsibilities. Thus, everyone was feeling satisfaction. This was pure devotional service, to be free from all material desires, and to serve Krishna as directed by spiritual master and the scriptures. When Prabhupada said that his disciples would become happy by serving Krishna, he spoke from his own deep realization of that ecstasy. Whenever he installed a deity in one of the temples, his ecstasy was greater than that of any of his disciples. At the Radha Yatra festivals in Golden Gate Park or any public preaching function, he was the most enlivened. He, more than any of his disciples, wanted the public to come and chant and dance in the temple and see the deity of Krishna, and when they did, he was the most pleased. And if a disciple fell away, Prabhupada was the most displeased. Nor was Prabhupada aloof from the details of temple management, the cost of things, how the devotees were being received in public, how each disciple was advancing. Although his disciples saw him as the most exalted Vaishnava, an intimate associate of Lord Krishna, they knew he was always available to guide them in their services. He was their leader, but he was with them. He was far above them, but he remained close to them. Only rarely did he leave them behind, as at the Los Angeles deity installation, when he began to cry, speaking directly to Krishna. Krishna, I'm most rotten and fallen, but have brought this thing for you. Please take it. Except for such rare moments, Prabhupada's disciples saw him preaching and serving along with them. San Francisco, July 25, 1969. The day before Radha Yatra festival, Prabhupada arrived at the San Francisco airport, where a crowd of 50 chanting devotees greeted him. Reporters stepped forward with what to them was an important and relevant question. Swami, what is your opinion on the recent manned U.S. moon landing? Shall I flatter you or tell you the truth? Prabhupada asked. The truth, they said. It's a waste of time because it does not benefit you if you cannot live there. The time could have been better spent in Krishna consciousness. We must go beyond this universe to spiritual sky, which is eternal, beyond birth, death, old age, and disease. The San Francisco Chronicle printed a picture and story, Ecstasy in Concourse B. On the day of the Radha Yatra parade, 100 devotees and a crowd of 1,000 gathered on Hyde Street before the tall cart. Smiled down upon the crowd. A group of devotee musicians seated themselves within the cart, made last-minute checks of their loudspeaker system, and began kirtana. In the center of the cart, just beneath the deity platform, a red upholstered Vyasasana awaited Prabhupada's arrival. As Prabhupada's car approached, he could hear the cries of the devotees, and as he stepped from the car, he saw them all bow down in obeisances. Folding his hands and smiling, he acknowledged his enthusiastic disciples, and he looked around with pleasure at the large crowd that had already gathered. Turning toward the cart, he beheld the deities on their throne, the same deities who had inaugurated Ratha Yatra in America 2 years before. They were beautifully dressed and garlanded, and multicolored pennants and thick garlands of carnations decorated their cart. Radha Yatra was becoming more wonderful each year. Prabhupada bowed down before Jagannatha, Subhadra, and Balarama, and his disciples all bowed with him. As Prabhupada took his seat on the cart, the kirtana began again, and the cart, pulled with two long ropes by dozens of men and women, slowly began to move forward. Buckets of burning frankincense poured aromatic clouds from the deity's platform above Prabhupada's head as slowly the cart moved along the road to the park. How many people are behind us? Prabhupada asked, turning to Tamala Krishna, who rode beside him on the cart and had been leading the kirtana. Tamala Krishna climbed back and surveyed the crowd as far as he could see. 5,000? Sing Jaya Jagannath, Prabhupada said, and Tamala Krishna then changed the chant from Hare Krishna to Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannath. Throughout the parade, Prabhupada sat serenely watching, his right hand in his bead bag. The large crowd consisted mostly of young hippies, but also included businessmen dressed in suits and ties, elderly persons with their grandchildren and families, and a few stray dogs, a mixed Sunday crowd. Suddenly, devotees in front began shouting, "Stop the cart! Stop the cart!" Ahead, the low arch of the park bridge spanned the roadway. The devotees managed to stop the 35-foot-high cart just before it reached the bridge. Although the parade appeared to have reached an unforeseen impasse, the chanting continued unabated. The previous year, the procession had taken the same route with a smaller cart, and even then, Shyama Sundara had to climb up and saw off the spire. This year, however, Naranarayana had devised a collapsible dome with a crank to lower the canopy and superstructure. When Prabhupada had heard of these plans, he had asked, "Are you sure you want to depend on mechanical means? It could be a disaster." Now the time to lower the canopy had come, and the crank would not work. When the cart stopped before the bridge, the chanters gathered in greater numbers, facing Prabhupada and Lord Jagannath. Under the bridge, at least 1,000 voices sang together, creating an incredible echo. Then Prabhupada stood, raised his arms to the crowd, and began dancing. Bhavananda, everyone went wild. The sound was so uproarious, you were defeated. You are deafened under the bridge. Prabhupada was dancing, jumping on the cart. Naranarayana. He was dancing, and as he danced, his feet crushed the flowers. His garland broke, and the flowers began cascading everywhere as he danced up and down. He was leaping very deliberately, almost like a slow motion. Tamala Krishna. Prabhupada was jumping up and down, and the people went crazy seeing him in complete ecstasy. He kept jumping and slowly turned around until he was face to face with Lord Jagannath. Prabhupada sat down, and still the cart did not go, and the people were roaring. "What do they want?" Prabhupada asked Tamala Krishna. "I think they want to see you dance again, Srila Prabhupada," Tamala Krishna replied. "Do you think so?" "Yes." He then got up and started dancing again. The white wool cap pushed to the back of his head, his arms extended, with the right hand still clutching the japa bead bags, his right forefinger extended, and long robes flowing. The ecstatic chanting and dancing continued. After about 15 minutes, Naranarayana finally got the crank to work, and down came the canopy. Again, the cart moved forward under the bridge and on through the park. The crowd had grown now to 10,000. This was much bigger than any Krishna consciousness festival ever held before. Bhagavananda. Many of these people who attended Radha Yatra were intoxicated. We were not intoxicated, of course, but we were higher than they. That we could understand. Everyone was smiling, everyone was laughing, everyone was in ecstasy, everyone was dancing, everyone was chanting. And we were doing it more than anyone. We were doing more than chanting, more laughing and smiling and feeling more freedom. We were free to have a shaved head, free to wear dhoti, free to blow a conch shell, free to spin around on the street and jump up. Even if you were a hippie, you couldn't be more far out than the Ratha Yatra cart and Jagannatha, because no one looks more far out than him. The hippies had come dressed up in outfits with big feathers in their hair and everything, but they were dim compared to Jagannatha. The parade route ended at the Oceanside Dance Hall, the family dog auditorium, where the devotees had prepared 10,000 feast plates of prasadam, fruit salad, apple chutney, halwa, and watermelon slices. Although the cart had stopped, the chanting continued as Prabhupada led the crowd inside the auditorium to a temporary stage and altar the devotees had erected among the bizarre trappings of the dance hall. A giant silk screen of Lord Chaitanya covered the hall's Tibetan mandala, and pictures of Lord Vishnu and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati were on the stage. The Jagannath deities now looked down from their high platform above Prabhupada's seat, and the garlanded statue of Lord Krishna stood on the marble pillar. Prabhupada began speaking and the crowd quieted. He quoted a song by Narottama Dasa Thakura. My dear Lord Chaitanya, please be merciful upon me. I do not find anyone as merciful as you. Drawing the audience attention to the large silk screen of Lord Chaitanya, Prabhupada described the Lord's merciful distribution of the holy name of God. Lord Chaitanya, he said, was teaching the same thing Lord Krishna had taught in Bhagavad Gita. My dear sons, do not suffer in this abominable condition of material existence. Come back to me, come back to home. Enjoy eternal, blissful life, a life of knowledge. Prabhupada explained the simplicity of Krishna consciousness. Lord Chaitanya appeared 5,000 years ago to establish the direct principles of Bhagavad Gita. He showed that even if you do not understand the process of religion, then simply chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The results are practical. For example, when we were chanting Hare Krishna, all the members who are assembled here, we're joining in. But now when I'm talking about philosophy, some are leaving. It is very practical. You can see the Hare Krishna mantra is so enchanting that anyone in any condition can take part. And if he continues to chant, gradually he will develop his dormant love of God. It is very simple. We are requesting everyone to chant the Hare Krishna mantra and take prasadam. When you are tired of chanting, the prasadam is ready. You can immediately take prasadam. And if you dance, then all body exercise is Krishnaized. And all of the attempts of the yoga process are attained by this simple process. So chant, dance, take prasadam. If you do not at first hear this philosophy, it will act and you will be elevated to the highest platform of perfection. In the middle of a winter of struggle came a fortunate break for the London devotees, a meeting with George Harrison of the Beatles. For a long time, the devotees had been thinking of ways to get the Beatles to chant Hare Krishna. To the Beatles' Apple Records studio, they had once sent an apple pie with Hare Krishna lettered on it. Another time, they had sent a wind-up walking apple with the Hare Krishna mantra printed on it. They had even sent a tape of one of their kirtanas and had received a standard rejection letter from the Apple Records. So it seemed to be Krishna's special arrangement when Shyama Sundar suddenly met one of the most sought-after celebrities in the world, George Harrison. In a crowded room at Apple Records, Shyama Sundar, shaved-headed and wearing robes, sat hoping for a chance to have a few words with someone connected with the Beatles. Then George came down the stairs from the conference. As he entered the room, he saw Sundara. Walking over and sitting down beside Shyama Sundara, he asked, "Where have you been? I've been trying to meet the Hare Krishna people for the last couple of years." Shama Sundara and George talked together for an hour while everyone else hovered around. I've really been trying to meet you people, George said. Why don't you come to my place tomorrow? The next day, Shama Sundara went to George's for lunch, where he met the other Beatles, Ringo Starr, John Lennon, and Paul McCartney. They all had questions, but George was especially interested. George, I had a copy of Hare Krishna album, the Srila Prabhupada singing Hare Krishna with the devotees. I'd had the record at least 2 years, but I got it the week it was pressed. I was open to it. You attract those things. So I used to play that a lot of the time. I was chanting the Hare Krishna mantra long before I met Shama Sundara, Gurudasa, and Makunda. I was just pleased to hear the Hare Krishna mantra and have a copy of the record. And I knew about Prabhupada because I had read all the liner notes of that album. Having been to India, I could tell where the devotees were all coming from. With the style of dress and shaved heads, I had seen them on the streets of Los Angeles and New York. Having read so many books and looking for yogis, my concept of the devotees wasn't like of the other people who think the devotees have all escaped from the lunatic asylum in their pajamas. No, I was aware of the thing that it was a pretty heavy one, much more austerities than other groups, like no coffee, chocolate, or tea. Shama Sundara continued to see George regularly, and they soon became friends. George, who had been practicing a mantra given him by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, began to hear for the first time about Bhakti Yoga and the Vedic philosophy. He talked openly to Shama Sundara, Gurudasa, and Mukunda of his spiritual quest and his realizations of karma. George, a yogi I met in India said, "You are really lucky. You have youth, fame, fortune, health, but at the same time, that's not enough for you. You want to know about something else. Most people don't even get to the point where they realize there is something beyond that wall. They are just trying to get up on top of the wall, to be able to eat and have a nice house and be comfortable and all that. But I was fortunate enough to get all that in time to realize there is something else to life, whereas most people get worn out just trying to attain material things." After a visit to Haight-Ashbury in 1967, George had begun to feel guilty for his role in promulgating the LSD culture. He had had the impression that the hippies of Haight-Ashbury were creative craftsmen, but when he saw them drugged, dirty, and hopeless, a West Coast extension of the Bowery, he felt partly responsible. He decided to use his influential position by writing and singing songs about something more than psychedelics and sex. He was also feeling an increasing interest in Indian spirituality, due, he felt, to karma from his previous lives. George, I feel at home with Krishna. I think that's something that has been there from a previous birth. So it was like the door was opening to me at that time, but it was also like a jigsaw puzzle, and I needed all these little pieces to make a complete picture. And that is what has been happening by the devotees and Swami Bhaktivedanta coming along, or some devotee giving me a book, or my hearing that album. It's all been slowly fitting together. And these are some of the reasons why I responded to Shama Sundara and Gurudasa when they first came to London. Let's face it, if I'm going to have a stand up and be counted, then I'll be with these guys rather than with those over there. It's like that. I'll be with the devotees rather than the straight people who are so-called saints. George offered to help the devotees to get building in London, and he and Shama Sundara spoke of making a Hare Krishna record, but Shama Sundara never pressed him. George was a glamorous superstar, the quiet, serious Beatle, the fabulous guitarist and singer who had access to all the greats, to the presidents and the queens, wherever he went. And Shama Sundara had a glamour of his own. He was tall, 60 feet 2, and although shape-headed, strikingly handsome. And he was a Vaishnava, fully dedicated to the Indian spirituality George was so fond of. When Prabhupada heard about George, he took seriously the possibility that George might fully take up Krishna consciousness. Carrying this to its logical conclusion, Prabhupada envisioned a world revolution in consciousness, spearheaded by the Krishna conscious Beatles. It is understood from your letter that Mr. George Harrison has a little sympathy for our movement, and if Krishna is actually satisfied on him, surely he will be able to join with us in pushing on the Sankirtan movement throughout the world. Somehow or other, the Beatles have become the cynosure of the neighboring European countries and America also. He's attracted by our Sankirtan party, and if Mr. George Harrison takes the leading part in organizing a huge Sankirtan party consisting of the Beatles and our ISKCON boys, surely we shall change the face of the world, so much politically harassed by the maneuvers of the politicians. For the London devotees, George's friendship heightened the excitement of Prabhupada's coming to London. Now that the world-famous personality was waiting to meet Prabhupada, they felt perhaps they had another way to please him and to make preaching in London a success. George, by his association with Krishna consciousness and by dint of his own spiritual evolution, began to express his devotion to Lord Krishna in his songs. Reading Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, he could appreciate the superiority of the personal conception of God over the impersonal. Guru Dasa showed George the verse in the Gita where Krishna says that he is the basis of the impersonal Brahman. George liked the concept of Krishna consciousness, but he was weary of showing exclusive devotion to Prabhupada and Krishna. The devotees therefore dealt with him accordingly so as not to disturb him. On January 11th, Srila Prabhupada wrote another letter to the devotees in London, expressing more ideas of how George could best serve Krishna. I'm so glad that Mr. Harrison is composing songs like Lord whom we so long ignored. He is very thoughtful. When we actually meet, I shall be able to give him thoughts about separation from Krishna, and they will be able to compose very attractive songs for public reception. The public is in need of such songs, and if they are administered through the nice agents like the Beatles, it will surely be great success. Prabhupada cautioned the devotees not to simply depend on George for help, but to try to find a building themselves and rent it. George did want to help, however, and again he suggested the devotees make a record on the Apple label. An old favorite idea of the London devotees had been to get the Beatles to make a record chanting Hare Krishna. If the Beatles did it, the mantra would certainly become world famous. George liked the idea, but he preferred that the devotees sing it, and he produced it on the Apple label. You guys make the money rather than we get it, he said. Let's make a record. So the devotees went over to the George's house for a chanting session. George dubbed in his guitar, and a few weeks later, the devotees returned and heard the tape. George was ready to try a session at the studio, so the devotees agreed to meet him and his musician friend Billy Preston at Trident Studios on St. Anne's Alley. They recorded for a few hours. The tape sounded good. George and Shyama Sundara agreed on a date for the actual recording. On the day of the recording, about a dozen devotees, including some newly recruited Britishers, assembled at EMI Recording Studios on Abbey Road. When the first group of devotees arrived in George's Mercedes, a crowd of teenagers began singing Hare Krishna to the tune popularized by the rock musical Here. While Yamuna applied Vaishnava Tilaka to the foreheads of the recording technicians, Malati began unpacking the picnic baskets of prasadam she had brought, and some of the other devotees put up pictures of Krishna and lit the incense. The studio was Krishnaized, with Paul McCartney and his wife Linda operating the control console. The recording session began. Everyone worked quickly, making side one of the 45 RPM record in about an hour. George played organ and Mukunda played mridanga. Yamuna sang the lead with Shyamasundara backing her. and the other voices blended in the chorus. And to make it come out exactly right, everyone concentrated on Prabhupada and prayed for spiritual strength. On the fourth take, everything went smoothly, with Malathi spontaneously hitting a brass gong at the end. When they recorded the flip side of the record, prayers to Srila Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya, and his associates, and the six Goswamis. Afterwards, George dubbed in the bass guitar and other voices. The devotees, engineers, everyone felt good about it. This is going to be big, George promised. As the records went into production, the devotees returned to their regular work, still living separately. Prabhupada set the time of his arrival for early September. He would go to Hamburg and then come to London, he said, even if there was no temple. Miraculously, only 2 months before Prabhupada's arrival, things began to come together. Gurudasa met a real estate agent with a building on Buri Place near the British Museum. The devotees could move in immediately. An ideal location, 41 pounds a week, and immediately occupancy. It was wonderful. Mukunda wrote Prabhupada asking him for money for the down payment. Prabhupada agreed. Shyamasundara got a letter from George on Apple Corporation LTD stationery stating that Apple would guarantee payments if all devotees defaulted. Within a week, the devotees had a 5-story building in central London. But when the devotees went to live in their new center in Buri Place, city officials said they did not have the proper housing permits. The red tape could take weeks, even months. Again, the devotees were without a place to live and worship together. Shyamasundara, however, on faith in that everything would work out, began constructing a temple room of California redwood in the building. John Lennon then suggested to Shyamasundara that the devotees come and live with him at Tittenhurst, a large estate he had recently purchased near Ascot. He needed some renovation done, and if the devotees would help, he would give them a place to live. Can our guru also stay there? Shyamasundara asked. John agreed, and the devotees moved into the former servants' quarters at John's estate. Only a few weeks before Prabhupada's arrival, the record Hare Krishna mantra was released. Apple Records staged a promotion and brought press reporters and photographers in a multicolored bus to a blue and white pavilion where the devotees had gathered with George. The first day, the record sold 70,000 copies. Within a few weeks, the devotees appeared on the popular TV show, Top of the Pops, singing their song. John Lennon's estate, formerly owned by Cadbury family, consisted of 76 acres of lawn and forest, with a large manor and many smaller buildings. John and his wife Yoko lived in the manor. The servants' quarters, where Prabhupada and the devotees were to live, were 4 separate apartments in a single narrow building near the manor. About 15 devotees moved in, reserving 1 apartment for Prabhupada and his servant. John wanted the devotees to tear out the hardwood walls and floors in the main house and replace them with new walls and black and white marble tile floors. While this renovation was beginning, Ishana, who had recently arrived from Canada, began with a few helpers to convert the old music recital hall into a temple, complete with Vyasasana for Srila Prabhupada. The devotees worked day and night on Prabhupada's quarters, the temple room, and Prabhupada's Vyasasana. With such energy did they work that John and Yoko could see that the devotees were obviously in love with their spiritual master. When the devotees were making a tape to send to Prabhupada in Germany, Ishana asked John if he had anything he wanted to say to their guru. John smiled and said he would like to know Prabhupada's secret that made his followers so devoted. The stage was set. The time had come for the principal character to enter. Lord Krishna's pure devotee was at last coming to England. For the 6 devotees who had pioneered Krishna consciousness in London, it had been a long struggle. But now it seemed that all their once impossible dreams were coming true. They had found a place for Prabhupada to live in, and they had obtained a temple in the center of London. This was Krishna's blessing.
Shāstra.